That's fine.
Yeah. On a utilitarian view, if it is not the case that if the individual had not done that action, the result would have.
We can all agree that, let's say I told you, I agree with you that animals do have the same amount of moral consideration and we should take care of them because they are also sentient. But I actually eat steak and I do all that stuff. Are you saying that that is okay with you? Would that be okay?
Oh, on my view, it wouldn't be okay with me.
But I eat steak.
Okay. So then on my view, that's not okay with me. What's the problem?
So tell me why I shouldn't eat the steak. That's what I mean
by
I
wait, hold on. So but what's the problem? Like you said, there's something that doesn't make sense. On my view, I wouldn't be okay with that. But like, but you said there was something that was like not making sense. Like, what's not making sense?
It's not making the sense that you're saying that you are not. I get that you're not every single conversation trying to change somebody's mind. I get that. I'm not saying you're not just sometimes wanting to have a conversation. I'm not saying you always have the end goal of, oh, I want to change this person's mind. But all I was saying was I think that a lot of it is if you're going to fight with other vegans online, let's say, because they say something that's empirically wrong, the reason that you would be fighting them, okay, I buy it. It's partly that it's a hobby and you like the intellectual pursuit, but part of it for sure has to be that you are wanting to not spread misinformation about veganism and that lifestyle so people are not turned away from it, right? That's
part of it. That's part of it. Maybe that. Sure. So what's the problem? So what's the problem? What's not making sense? What's not making sense?
What's not making nothing is not making sense. I'm saying that.
But you said something. It's not making. You said it wasn't making sense. I just want to know what's not making sense.
Okay. Well, you want to go all the way to the beginning where I started by saying.
That's the question I've been asking for quite some time now.
Okay. Well, yes. So what I say is the reason that it doesn't make sense to me, sentience aside, that's not an argument I believe. I don't believe other animals. I don't believe other animals deserve the same moral consideration as human beings.
Okay. And what's not making sense?
Okay. So what I'm saying is when you're now focusing on animals, okay, and you're fighting in part for veganism.
What do you mean that I'm focusing on animals? Like, by focusing on animals? What does that mean?
Well, by focusing on rights of animals and veganism.
What is that? What is that? Can you just? I don't understand what that means. When you say I'm focusing. Do you mean by not eating them?
Well,
do you mean by not eating them?
Well, yes.
Okay, yes. So by not, is there more? What else is there?
Just a second, by promoting that kind of lifestyle, by doing that, you're clearly not focusing on other things, like other human beings. That's what I was saying at the beginning. There's all kinds of human rights abuses going on all over the world.
Yeah,
and what I'm saying is that to me, when there's so many problems to still be solved and work on around the world, for somebody to be interested in veganism, there's something off about that. There's something off about it.
It doesn't seem off to me. When you say something doesn't make sense? Do you mean you just don't share the same? Wait, do you just mean that you don't share the same value, or do you mean that something is illogical?
No, I'm saying your value is bullshit. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, wait. Do you think? Are you like a moral realist or something, or do you say my value is bullshit? Like, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, I do think there is an objective morality. If that's what.
What's the art? Wait, by objective, do you mean like mind external?
No, I just mean
mind independent.
I just think that we can. I don't know all the philosophy terms, but that's not something I've studied.
What do you mean when you say there's an objective morality?
What I mean by that is we could come to like an objective morality based on understanding human behavior.
This isn't answering what you mean by objective morality. So I'll ask the question again. When you say objective morality, what is it that you think you're saying?
I'm saying there's an empirical basis for morality that does not include veganism.
When you say objective morality, what is it that you think you're saying?
Empirical. Largely, I'm talking about
wait. You just mean, by empirical, you just mean the things that scientists do? Like, the things that scientists study? And so you're just talking about descriptive things then? You're not talking about things that we should do?
No, I'm talking about things. I'm talking about description and going from that description to what we should be doing based on what the empirical evidence says on that thing. That's what I'm saying.
So you think that we can get to conclusions about what we should be doing based on what the empirical evidence says describes the world as?
Yes, I agree.
And this is based on, and just to be clear, this is not based on any like hypothetical norm, or this is not based on any like prior values. Okay, so like that's like is what gap crossing. So like what's the argument? So what's the argument for that?
Well, I mean, do we want to get into this?
Well, you said my values. Yeah, I mean, you said my values are bullshit. I don't know how you can say that. I mean, maybe with respect to your values, yeah, but that's just not interesting. Now, if you think you have an argument for objective morality, sure, like, go ahead. Like, how do you think you can cross the Azog gap? Like, go ahead, present it.
Well, how do you, well, what exactly, like, do you have a specific, like, or what?
Oh, you said that there was, you said that there was objective morality. I asked you what you thought you were saying when you said that.
Did you put your phone down or something?
No, I have it. You said that there was objective morality. So you said that
I can't hear you very well.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Speaker.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I can hear you.
You can turn the volume up on me, like by clicking on me if you want. Anyway.
Well, it was totally fine, aside from like.
But you said that there was objective morality, and then when I asked what you thought you were saying when you said objective morality, you said but objective. So I'll just tell you what the word of standard is.
Well, when you said, are you a moral realist, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that means moral
like
propositions have truth values, and at least one of those propositions are true.
Okay.
Okay, and then when you talk about objectivism, and it also, would be a form of. It depends if you're a weak realist or like a robust realist. But what I'm interested in is you said that there's an objective morality. And I'm still not clear, actually, on what you mean by that.
Well, what I mean is that, okay, so I obviously keep bringing up behavior, and action, as that's very important for...
What's objective morality mean? Like, can you just give me a
definition
for what you mean?
Okay, definition on...
Objective morality.
Objective?
Okay, so by objective, I simply mean, I don't have a philosophy background, I simply mean that it's empirical in basis. That's all I mean.
Okay, so you don't mean anything about it being like mind independent, mind external. You don't mean it being like true or false regardless of what we feel or value.
No, I don't think
desire.
that's possible.
So you just think that, okay, so we can go out in the world and
yeah. I mean,
okay,
but
that's compatible. You realize that's compatible with morality just being what each individual, like my morality being what my values are and your morality being what your values are, right? We could both do empirical things to figure out our values.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean,
so is all you're
exactly.
saying? So is all you saying when you say my values are bullshit is that you don't like my values? Is that all you're saying?
What I'm saying is that. So you're saying as long as it's objective to you, to an individual, that would be.
By objective, you just mean that there's an empirical way of evaluating it. Well, yeah, I'm sure there's an empirical way of evaluating what my values are. Sure. But that doesn't tell me why I should care. Why I should care about your values more than mine.
Okay.
So if you're saying my values are bullshit, I'm like, well, why would I think they're bullshit?
Okay. But do you see a problem of saying that why should I care about what you care? You're a human, I'm a human, but you're telling me to care about an animal.
I'm not telling you to. I haven't told you to care about anything.
No, but you fight for it day and night on
Sometimes
your channel.
not day. That's not necessarily true. I fight for life. I fight for lots of things day and night. I just have to. In fact, I actually think at this point most of my debates are actually not on veganism. I could be wrong about that, but regardless, no, I haven't told you yet to do anything. So
no, of course I know our conversation started like that. I wanted to get a sense of, are you trying to? Is it when I think about like, okay, another issue like abortion, like the reason people feel very strongly apart about that is because they do see it as literally killing a baby. In their view, whether that perception is right or wrong, that's a whole different conversation. But the whole point
I'm not understanding how my values are bullshit.
Well, I mean, bullshit is not a very precise word.
So when you say my values are bullshit, what is it that you think you're saying?
Not meaningful. That's what I mean.
Meaningful to you?
No, it's not meaningful to anybody. It's not useful.
Oh, wait, hold on. Change it. Useful to meaningful is not the same thing as useful. When you say useful, what does that mean? What do you mean when you say my values aren't useful? When you say my values, okay, look, you said two things there. First thing you said is my values aren't meaningful to anyone. That's not true. There are some people who my values are meaningful to. There are plenty of people who have written me asking about my values all the time. It's clearly meaningful to them. So that's just a false thing.
Well, I mean,
say my values
well,
are
no,
not
I mean,
meaningful to anyone.
I'm talking about for humanity. I'm talking about in general for the collective, the human species as a whole. I'm not talking about.
Oh, wait. So are you saying my values are not meaningful instead of to anyone? By anyone, you just mean.
Well, of course.
Everyone.
Well, dude, you can be useful to somebody if through anything.
Now we're changing the word
virtually
useful.
any action.
So now we're talking about useful. Useful is different than meaningful. So when you say useful, what do you think it is that you're saying?
I'm talking about in terms of utility.
Oh, in terms of utility. Oh, okay. Are you a utilitarian?
Again, we go into the philosophy. I'm more of a, I would say I am more so, because I do think the overall impact of an action is more important than
the actions,
than how it affects particular people. So
I don't.
In that sense, yes.
Oh, I don't share that value. I'm not a utilitarian.
Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Well, why should I? So now, if you're saying my actions aren't overall useful, well, I mean that's just an empirical question. I don't know the data on the downstream effects of utility for my actions. I suspect you don't either. So I would like to know what evidence you have for that assertion.
None.
Well, for that assertion, well, because it places. Okay, so it places. Veganism in general will place a burden on people around the world that might, as I said, like.
Wait, you didn't say you said my values. You said my values. You didn't say veganism. You said my values. How is it what's your evidence that my values don't have utility for people? and view utility on the world? Like, what's
Well,
the data for that claim?
The data for that? Well,
Yeah, I mean, it's an empirical claim, right? So,
Hmm.
well, I mean, it is an empirical claim, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, when
but-
someone makes an empirical claim, the
Okay,
standard we
okay,
have is
let
that
me
we
try it
ask
this
for
way.
evidence.
Let me try it this way.
Wait, before we try it a different way, do you agree that you don't have any evidence for the empirical claim that you just made?
I'm not sure about that, but I'll get back to you.
Well, okay, so wait, no. You said that my values don't have any utility for the world, so that's an empirical claim. I asked you why, what reason, what evidence you have for that empirical claim.
Hmm.
You haven't provided any.
well-
Do you still hold the claim?
Well, just the idea that you've decided that because animals deserve as much moral consideration as everybody else, you've essentially decided that, like, by spreading that message, you're not considering like all the other factors that would make that like an objective kind of thing. Like you.
Okay,
like
so that
you
was
decided
attempt 1 to answer the question. We'll go for 3. So I'll repeat the question. So my question is, what evidence do you have that my values don't have utility for the world?
I don't, because if you are focusing on things that are in some sense not compatible to helping other human beings, you're wasting time that you could otherwise be doing something else. Like, there's real problems all over the world, things that you can tackle, but you have decided to tackle something that's kind of outside of that.
Okay, so that was try 2 to attempt to answer the question. We'll go for a third
That's not an
try.
attempt. That's not an
Try for a
attempt. That's
2.
an
So
answer.
the question, maybe you
like
haven't
the
been clear
answer.
about what the question is.
You don't like the
the question
answer.
is not having anything to do with my action. The question is my values. You said you claim my values, which are compatible for all of my actions, by the way.
Okay,
doing all the things you want
here.
to do.
Just a second. Do your values impact your actions?
To some degree, they do.
Okay,
sure.
so then we're talking
But-
about actions. If you just mean that you have values in your head and they don't inform your actions, then we might as well not be talking. When I say
Well,
values,
to some
I
degree,
am
to some
inferring
degree they
that
do.
your
To some
values
degree
impact
they
your
do.
actions.
To some degree they do. Now those value
Of
impacts of
course.
the action, now those value impacts of the actions can have the spectrum of influence on utility. They can have a negative, they can have a greatly negative impact. They can have a negative impact, a mildly negative impact, a null impact. They can have a weakly positive impact, a great impact, a huge positive impact, and everything in between. Now your claim was that they don't have utility for the world. I take that to be that my values don't have any
All I'm
utility,
saying is
anything on the positive side.
all I'm saying is if I was to set up an objective, like a more objective ethics, it would not include veganism. That's all I'm telling you.
I don't know what you mean by objective ethics, and I don't think you do
Again,
either, based on
I
how you tried to answer that.
empirical.
Now, I'll try one more time. I'll try one more
How
time.
many times have I said that
Now
when
what-
I say objective,
now
I
what
mean
is-
empirical?
Well, I mean, if you just mean empirical, there are plenty of ways of empirically evaluating things, and I don't see why anyone's morality is any more or less objective than the others. I guess there could be if they're not doing empirical things, but like,
So
okay,
are you a
and
subjectivist?
of course I am.
Oh, you are? Okay, well, this makes a lot of sense then.
Of course I am.
Okay.
Now, I'll try one more time for the question. So, I take it to be that my values have no utility for the world, meaning that of all the possible contributions that my values have on the world, they don't contribute anything on the net positive to any degree. So they would either be zero utility contribution to the world or some kind of negative utility contribution to the world. Now, you made that claim. I'll try one more time to ask for evidence for that claim. And if you don't give me evidence or retract the claim, I think we'll be done here.
Well, I mean that's not that's not my intention of going into this wasn't to make a statement like that. It was to understand why. So I
So
don't, like
you
I
made
can't
the. Are
say
you going
that
to?
there's
Are you going to either that? Okay. So just to be clear, are you not going to do one of the following two things? Back off the claim and say, oh wait, I actually made a claim and overstepped because I actually didn't know what I was talking about, nor do I have the evidence to back that up. Or are you going to defend the claim and present evidence?
No.
based on the evidence that I know about veganism and how
My
much
values,
land,
about my values. So it's about my values, right? The claim was about my values.
Mm-hmm.
yes.
So my
So
values
specifically on the
don't
veganism
have
or
utility.
in general?
It's my value. So your claim was my values don't have utility for the world. Now,
Specifically the veganism
all right.
thing.
So we're going to try for an answer. This is the last time. Let's go.
Are you asking specifically for the veganism?
Oh, no, I
My
said values.
values.
My values, I don't intrinsically value veganism. It just follows from other values that I do have.
Okay, well then, yeah, of course I would retract that because I'm more talking about your veganism. I don't even know all your other views, so how can I know your full values? You just said you're a subjectivist.
Okay, cool. So
that
thank
tells me
you.
something.
So thank you for retracting the claim. Okay, cool. Now I'm running out of time, and it seems to be, I understand why I asked yourself ban you, because it's very, like with other people, it would take very little time to get to this. I will say the following things. So I'm not going to ban you. I will keep you in the server. So you do come off, I'm not going to ban you because you actually did retract your claim, and you couldn't provide evidence for it. So I'm just going to say, and I do have to go now, but I'll say the following things. We could continue the conversation a later time. The things I'll say at this point is you come off like a massive, I agree with Asker's, you do come off like a massive motivated reasoner. This may not be because you're a motivated reasoner, it may just because you have very poor critical thinking skills and you haven't studied philosophy or logic at all, and so you don't seem to be able to track a point very well. You don't seem to be able to stay on target at all. And you don't seem to be able to condense the points you're trying to make into clear, succinct things. Instead, you have a tendency to ramble quite a bit. So I would work on those things. And
well, listen,
and hopefully the next
can I say
conversation
something?
can be... No.
Can I say something?
You can say something. I'm just not... I probably won't be interested in it. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, dude, if you're going to have a conversation, basically you and ask yourself, go on here and basically say, well, I'm not really interested in what you believe in. So then why have conversations at all? Like, first of all,
we can have their reasons.
I haven't seen
No, I'm
one
going to answer the
iota
question.
of
I'm
reason
going to answer.
or logic.
Don't make me think. Okay, so the answer to that question, the answer to the question is that it's actually compatible to have a conversation with someone and not care what their views are, what they or what their values are. Perfectly compatible. It all depends on the hyponorm that someone's having a conversation with someone.
Okay. Look, I have not seen any reason or logic from you here. All I've heard is a bunch
You haven't. Wait, I've given you a reason. You asked me my reason. I gave you my reason. You just didn't like it.
Yeah, you just said it's sentient, but like
you didn't like it. You just didn't like it.
Understand? Listen, you don't understand human behavior, and if you want to talk about ethics,
What do I not understand?
You don't know anything about. Did you study it?
Wait, you're making a claim that I don't understand human behavior. So what do you mean by that?
Student. I've studied psychology my whole life.
Okay,
Listen,
so what's the evidence that I wait? So what's the evidence that I? So what's you can finish if you're going to answer the question. Not if you're going to avoid the question. So what's the evidence that I don't know anything about human behavior? Yeah, what's the evidence that I don't know anything about human behavior?
Because based on our conversation.
Okay, how does it follow
is
based on our conversation? How does it follow? Like, what's the inference? What's the inference that this conversation...
Well, for one, can I say what it is?
Okay, well, you can, if you actually
Wait,
do
I
give it an
started-
inference, if you give
Okay.
an inference, yes.
Can I, Jesus Christ, man, you talk over everybody.
So the inference is what? Two. Wait, what's premise two? I want the inference. Premise two is behavior. Okay, so
Yes.
then specific things and ignore other. This one. So premise one is if I don't.
Specific things and ignore. If you think that it's not important for people to focus on specific things and ignore other things, then you don't know anything about human behavior or human beings.
Okay, that's premise one. So premise one is if I don't think it's important to focus on specific things and ignore other things, then I don't know anything about human behavior. Okay,
Yes.
so then premise
That's-
two. What's premise two? Wait, what's premise two? I want the inference.
Premise
So premise
two is
is
to act in the world successfully, you have to know what to ignore and what to focus on. It's part of survival.
okay.
That's
And
how
then we
human
have two
beings survive.
premises. And what's? Do you have another premise or do you have a conclusion?
Yeah, and the conclusion is then I think you know what the conclusion is.
What's the
Then you
conclusion?
can't make you can't like you have
Presumably, the conclusion is I don't know anything about human behavior.
well no, you have no basis to talk about ethics or human
Okay,
behavior
so
or
so
action in the
I'll
world.
point out a couple things.
So the
Number
third-
one, that's
so
a
the
formally
third- the conclusion is-
invalid. Yeah, what's the? Oh, that's a third premise. Oh, okay.
It's not.
Oh, it's a
It's
conclusion.
not. So
That was the
yeah,
conclusion?
you have
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you
that's a
have no
formally
basis
so
then
that's a
to
formally so that's a formally invalid argument. That's P. The premise one is P. Premise two is Q. Premise conclusion is R. So that's formally invalid. It doesn't follow. If you'd like to,
why doesn't it follow?
because premise one taking the form of proposition P, premise two taking the form of proposition Q, and conclusion taking the form of proposition R. It's a formally invalid argument. The conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. If you want, there's a logic thought checker that you can use to check that out. Since you are not in the Ask Yourself Discord, what you can do, I would recommend, is looking at Ask Yourself teaching Joey Carbstrong formal logic, because it seems that you don't seem to be capable of forming formal inferences that are valid. So I would encourage you to do that. I think it would be very helpful.
I disagree with you, as I said.
Okay. All right. So then, all right. So that's fine. It doesn't seem like you're a person that's really worth talking to. So
Well,
I'm going to
listen.
disengage.
Well, listen. You haven't also seemed like you wanted to engage. So, like, you haven't given me anything.
You had questions
You just
for me.
said-
I answered. No. I
Well, okay,
engaged with
dude.
your rambling for about an
There's
hour.
nothing. There's
So I answered your questions.
Hey,
You just didn't like them.
if
So
dude,
you
if
also
your
didn't seem to
answer
be able.
is
You also seem
that-
to make claims. I mean, if you're asking me for the reason why I'm vegan, it's because I value the. It's because my values lead to that conclusion. And if you're asking what values lead to that conclusion,
okay, but you haven't talked about those values.
no,
all you've said
I
is-
have. I've told you I value.
all
I
you've
value
said is
sentient
sentience.
beings. Well, that is a value. I value sentient beings.
Yeah, and what I'm telling you
So it's not the
is
case that I haven't talked about those values, right?
Yeah, if that's the only thing, I think you
I
need
mean,
to
it's
think
one of-
harder. And if you
it's-
think
it's
I have
one of-
critical thinking skill comes, you have a lot of them.
You
Because if
definitely have critical thinking.
Listen.
my dude. But it's an
Listen.
interesting combination because it's like this combination where you have no clue like how to structure a formal argument. You have no critical thinking skills. You can't track topics at all. But you also think you do know a lot of these things. You also do or at least you speak as if you do. It's that sweet combination of like arrogance and ignorance at the same time. So in fact, I do understand why.
what?
Why
Okay,
you were-
name one thing that I've said here that's ignorant.
You accused me of not knowing
I
anything about
accused you.
humans'
Okay,
behavior.
false already. False. I never
You,
accused you of anything.
well, you didn't even let me finish there. You accused me of
I didn't accuse you
not.
of anything.
You claimed you claim that I didn't know anything about human behavior.
Well, you.
And then when asked, what the inference was, you presented a formally invalid argument.
It's not formally invalid.
Oh,
it's not formally invalid.
Really?
Listen.
Really? Wait.
Listen.
Not formally invalid?
Listen.
Wait, hold on. Okay, so
Listen.
just so we're clear, the inference you presented, you're saying it's not formally invalid. Is that true? Do you think it's valid? Do you think it's formally valid?
As a syllogism, I don't know. Philosophy is not my background.
Wait, well, what do you mean? What do you think you're saying? And what do you think you're saying when you say formally invalid?
Well, maybe it is formally invalid. I don't know.
So okay. So why? See, here's the thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, why would you? No.
Just a second.
Why would? Nope.
Just a second.
Nope. So this is this is an example of the arrogance that I'm talking about. So when you say, you know, and look, if you can listen or not, but like, you can go the rest of your life being an arrogant ignoramus or not. It's up to you. But this is an example. You asked me for an example. Here's an example. When it's clear that you have no clue what even makes something formally valid or invalid, what inference rules are, it's clear that you have not the slightest clue what you're talking about. When I tell you you've presented a formally invalid argument, you resist and you say, no, it's not formally invalid. When it's clear, you don't even have the slightest clue.
You need to tell me why it's
formally invalid. Wait. Oh, I did. I told you. You didn't listen. I'll tell you again. Because
no, you just said
premise one taking the form. Because premise one taking the form of key, premise two taking the form of Q, and conclusion being R, doesn't follow any inference rule. There's no formally valid inference rule. There's no formally valid inference rule that connects the premises to the conclusion in such a way that if the premises were true, that the conclusion must be true.
Does it make you feel better that if you think that something doesn't follow logically, that there's no argument there at all? Are you saying that?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Just a
second.
Not what I'm saying.
Just a second.
No.
Are we saying that there's not a change that we can make?
Okay. If you talk over me again, you're out. You're getting okay. So.
Well, I'm trying to explain.
That's your last chance. So, I'm not saying anything of the sort. The only reason I'm bringing this up is because you asked me of an example for your combination of arrogance and ignorance. And I'm giving this to you as an example for your growth, because it's clear that you are displaying quite profound combination of arrogance and ignorance. You made a claim about whether something was formally valid or not after it was pointed out to you that it wasn't. When it's clear you don't have the first idea of what even makes something formally valid or invalid. That's just of your combination of. That's all. That's the only reason I brought it up. Is because you asked for an example. Okay.
So you're saying, because I haven't studied logic, that it's impossible that just because you can't understand what I'm saying, that it's not possible that I'm correct if we change.
No, that's not what I said either.
No,
that's not what I said.
Well,
that's
no, that's what I'm
strong.
saying.
That's not what I said.
So then
Excuse me.
don't say
That's not what I. No, I will say that because it's an answer to your
don't
question.
say that.
No, I'm not saying that. But I do point it out because it's an answer to your question. You asked me for an example of your combination of arrogance and ignorance, and I pointed one out. Give an example of profound arrogance and fault. So do you think the inference was valid? Do you think it was formally valid?
Okay.
Because you said it's not formally invalid. That's what you said. When I pointed out to you that the inference was formally valid, you said it's not formally invalid.
I didn't study logic.
Then why make the claim about formal logic if you haven't studied it?
Okay.
Like, why would you just go in and make claims about it?
I take that back then.
And do you understand? And do you understand why it strikes people who do understand formal logic as a combination of profound arrogance and ignorance?
Sure. And do you understand why, when you make statements like, why would that be important when you haven't studied human behavior? Why I might?
Did I say? Wait. When did I say why? Why did I say why would that be important?
you said, how does this relate to the conversation?
Oh, that I
Do you
that's not
see
the same
how it
thing
could
as
be
saying, why
known
would
when
that
you
be
haven't
important?
studied the graduate level psychology and you're telling me how human behavior works?
Wait. When did I say anything about human behavior?
This is part of human behavior research. Focusing
What claim did I make?
on not
Can you tell
focusing
me
on other
what
things.
claim did I make? So I can give you a claim that you made that's false. Can you give me a claim that I made that's false?
I think you basically said how is that relevant? You
Yeah,
said
that's a question.
Like,
That's a question.
Here,
it's a question.
no,
Yeah,
no,
sure.
let me finish off this thing.
So wait, I want an answer to my question. So like,
I'm not going to take more of your time. I'm not going to take more of your time.
So what I asked you is what
Let
claim?
me explain.
What claim did I make?
Let me explain.
What claim? Wait,
Let
are
me
you
explain.
saying what claim did I make? So here,
Let me explain.
look. Here's well, I don't think you're. No, we're already at the part where you failed because I'm giving you an example of a claim you made, where only someone who profound with arrogance and ignorance would make a claim like that. Now, you're not giving me an example of the claim I made. You're giving me a question that I asked you. Now, how is it the case that I am displaying profound arrogance and ignorance if I'm just asking a question? Like, I'm just asking for clarity. That's not a claim. I'm not coming in and go ahead.
Well, you said that. To be fair, this is one of my first debates, so okay, that's part of it. But I won't use excuses. Part of the problem is you're not understanding what I'm saying because I'm coming at this from a human behavior psychology perspective. You're coming at it from a logic perspective.
I don't see how this is answering the question.
No, because you're not. I'm saying that just as I'm not understanding that's logically consistent.
I want an example of a claim I made. I want an example of a claim I made.
Let me tell you.
I don't want to ramble. I don't want to ramble. Go ahead.
I know. I'm trying to give you an answer. What I'm telling you is when you said that's not. I don't see how that's relevant to what we're talking about. You showed your ignorance about psychology. And
okay, is it a combination of arrogance and wait.
Just a second, can I just finish?
No,
you
cannot. You cannot. Nope. So real quick, no, the reason you can't finish is because I've gotten enough to respond to in such that you've already missed the point. To know that you've already missed the point of what I tried to make. So it would be a waste of time to let you finish. So okay,
missed the point too.
Again. Well, I don't know how I don't know how that you can make the inference that I've missed the point of the point that I'm trying to make. I think I've got
logical claims, and you're saying I'm going around in circles, and I'm not addressing the questions. This is because you don't know the psychological literature. That's what I'm telling you.
We haven't even gotten to a claim that I made. What claim did I make? So again, you're saying if I ask a question, that may show ignorance. But it doesn't show a combination of arrogance and ignorance. If I ask a question,
I don't care, dude.
Now, you made it, but here's the problem, though. The problem is, you said that I did show an example of the combination of arrogance and ignorance, and when asked for that,
ignorance. I don't.
So just to be clear, you don't think that I showed a combination of arrogance and ignorance?
Well, you have been condescending. Oh, you don't.
Do you think that I've made a false claim?
Yes, of course. Do you think?
What's the false claim?
That I can't think critically, just because you're not willing to have.
No, it's just to be clear. No. That wasn't. Just to be clear, it seems that way to me. It seems based on our interaction. It seems to me that you have problems thinking critically. Now that's not a false claim. It is true. It is true that it seems that way to me.
Okay, well, that's fair enough.
So do we have another claim that you think is false that I made?
What did you say? Oh yeah, well, in the early going, you said, I think you said something like, I don't really care what you think about that, or something like that. Like, what's the point of having conversations if you don't care what people think about something?
All right, so that's try number one. So I'm going to ask the question again. Do you think there's any false claim that I've made? Let's see if we can get an answer.
I just told you.
That wasn't a claim.
I mean,
well, I guess if it was a claim, but do you think it's not a false claim? Let me just be clear. I've asked you for a false claim. It's not a false claim. So.
Yeah, that is a false claim.
Wait, what's the false claim?
No, that wasn't a false claim, but no, we were talking
about. Okay, so
were
do
you
have a
were you condescending or
do you think,
were you condescending?
Do you think I have? Okay, let's try number 2. Let's try number 2. Do you think I've made a false claim? Let's try number 3.
A false claim?
Yeah. Do you think I've said something, made a claim that's false?
Just about what you've said about me.
So you think it's false when I said it seems to me like you can't think critically? You think that was false claim?
Well, obviously I think that. Yeah. Besides that.
Wait, but it's true. Wait, but that's true. It does seem that way to me.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true for
okay,
you.
So do you think I made a
false
claim?
I disagree.
Do you think that? Do you think I made a false claim?
That's false to me, of course.
So you have access to my mind about what things seem like to me? Because the claim is, it seems to me that you can't think critically, or you have trouble thinking critically. Now, to say that's a false claim, it seems like you would have to. Have access to my feelings. Like you would have access to my mind. Like, is that the kind of thing you say you have? Like, maybe your psychology degree at the graduate level is really, like, exemplary, and maybe you do have access to my mind. I don't know. Like, is that the kind of thing that you're saying? Hello?
It's out.
Alright, I'm not appreciating an answer, but in any case, so
buddy, I'm just telling you, you're asking me why. I answered your question.
Is there a false claim
I
that you
have
think I
access
made?
to your brain. I don't have access to your brain, but I have
Then why do you
experience in
think
the
it's
world.
false? Then why do you think it's false?
Because I have experience in the world which tells me otherwise.
Oh, well, wait, it tells you you have experience in the world.
Answer?
Just to be clear, you have experience in the world. It tells me otherwise with respect to the claim that it seems to me that you have trouble thinking critically. Like, how does your experience of the world have anything to do with whether or not it seems like something to me? Like, even if I'm wrong, you realize, even if I'm wrong, the claim that it seems to me, even if I'm wrong about the content of the seeming, the claim that it seems to me would still be true, right? Like, do you appreciate that?
No.
All right. And anyway, I do. Something you're not coming through to me. I don't know if you're coming through to anyone else, but. All right. Anyway, it does seem like this is a waste of time, and I think I understand why he was banned. So okay, I'm gonna put him back on ban then. All right.
Radość Virgin Invest Scalazzi. So the first thing here is the Nature X dietary guideline recommendations from the Annals of Internal Medicine. This is, should we go through? Yeah, you know what? Let's go through it. Okay. Let's click on it. Okay. Got that open? Like keyboard search or something? Not right now. Let's see. Okay. So here's the recommendations that they came out with. The panel suggests, this is just reading recommendations, the panel suggests that adults continue current unprocessed red meat consumption. Weak recommendation, low certainty of evidence. Similarly, the panel suggests adults continue current processed meat consumption. Weak recommendation, low certainty of evidence. Primary funding source to none. Now, this is one of the things that from funding sources is contested. Some people are saying that there is a funding source that wasn't disclosed. Whatever. We'll get to that later. Let's go back to the Discord. So here are the papers that it was based on. It was based on several different meta-analyses. The first one was reduction of red processed meat intake and cancer mortality and concerns. The systematic review and meta-analysis of cohorts. So these are all, by the way, all of these are from Nutrex. It wasn't like Nutrex has a recommendation based on, but these are all from like the same group of authors. The second is patterns of red and processed meat consumption and risk for cardiometabolic cancer outcomes. The systematic review and meta-analysis of cohort studies. Third is effect of lower versus higher red meat intake on cardiometabolic outcomes. A systematic review of randomized trials. And the next one is red and processed meat consumption, risk of all-cause mortality and cardiometabolic outcomes. Systematic review and meta-analysis of cohort studies. And the fifth one is health-related values and preferences regarding meat consumption and mixed methods systematic review. Okay, so we're going to go through this. So what they found was that they found low effect sizes, which means that even when things were statistically significant, they didn't really pan out to having a high effect size. And then the chain of causation, they rejected the chain of causation, and they didn't upgrade the strength of the evidence for dose responses for several reasons. So the central inference that was used to reject causality and to not upgrade the evidence for dose responses was the following. Causality, the central inference the panel is used to reject causality between red meat health outcomes is that if red meat and processed meat were indeed likely causally related to adverse health outcomes, we would find stronger associations in studies that specifically address red meat and processed meat intake versus studies addressing dietary patterns. The absolute effect estimates for red meat and processed meat intakes were smaller than those of dietary pattern estimates. Therefore, red meat is not likely to be causal to heart disease. Now let's just take in what that means. So, dietary patterns. So what we can do is we can look at people who are at the highest quintile of red meat intake compared to the lowest quintile of red meat intake, and we can look at people, or we can say, okay, here's 3 servings. So we can say, here's the difference in quintile that would produce 3 servings a week of difference in red meat. And we can say, what's the relative risk for 3 servings, or 3 extra servings of red meat a week? And then we can say, okay, well, here are general dietary patterns that correlate with red meat consumption, rather than just examining the red meat itself. And if there's a stronger, and we can look and say, okay, with respect to the quintiles of whatever dietary pattern it is. So, for example, one of the dietary patterns was following affirming the statement, I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want. That was actually one of the studies that was pulled in one of these meta-analyses. There were all a bunch of different dietary patterns. And the point is that they generally track with meat. They generally correlated with meat. So the following a certain dietary pattern, which people take to be unhealthy, correlated with meat consumption. And what they're doing is they're comparing the dietary patterns. They are comparing the highest quintiles of following these dietary patterns that happen to track with red meat consumption to the lowest quintiles, the lowest categories. It doesn't have to be quintile, it can be tertile or quartile. Yeah. And then they're comparing, what they do is they compared that to the relative risk. So they got a relative risk from that. They pulled the relative risk. And then they compared that to the relative risk of various different outcomes, all-cause mortality, cardiovascular. cardiovascular disease. They compared that to the relative risk of having 3 additional servings of red meat per week. Could be processed or unprocessed, or mixed. Does that make sense? Are you tracking what I'm saying?
Okay, so you're saying that they're looking at the lowest and highest, quintile, tertile, whatever, of red meat consumption, and kind of similar to the.
So they're not. So they actually didn't. They could have done that, but they didn't.
Oh.
They're looking. Yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
Okay, wait.
They are.
So, well, I mean, well, if you want to walk through it again, I get the.
No, we have to. We're gonna have to get through it. We're gonna have to walk through it because it's really important. So here's what they did. So there's certain. So Isaac, there are certain dietary patterns, and these dietary patterns, adherence to a given dietary pattern, can be broken up into. Let's just give a hypothetical example. Can be broken up into quartiles. So let's say the dietary pattern is I'm going to eat whatever I want whenever I want. Let's just give that a hypothetical, which is, by the way, a real example used in one of the cohort schools, right?
Yep.
If you can stratify that, I adhere to that diet 25% of the time, I adhere to that diet 50% of the time, I adhere to that dietary pattern 75% of the time, or I adhere to that dietary pattern 100% of the time.
Yep.
Right?
Okay.
So you can stratify people into categories. And then you can compare the same thing, divide the risk of the highest by the risk of the lowest.
Yeah.
And the point is that there are given dietary patterns that correlate with red meat intake.
Yes. Yeah.
But the main thing we're tracking here is this comparison is we're not tracking red meat directly, we're tracking the dietary pattern directly. The other thing you can do is you can take the highest versus lowest consumption of meat, and you can compare it to that. Now that's not what they did. What they did with when they directly tracked red meat was they did it for 3 servings a week. So they said, we took the studies where they had all different, where they broke them down into different intakes of their meat, and they compared whatever the relative risk was, they calculated whatever the relative risk would be for a 3 serving difference per week. And that's what they compared it to. So they made that comparison. They're comparing what's greater when we pool all the data. Do the dietary patterns have a higher relative risk? Do they have a higher effective size? Or the effect size? Or does tracking the red meat directly give us the higher relative risk?
Okay, I need to understand that more carefully.
Yeah.
So, tracking the red meat directly is looking at the relative risk between what 2 groups?
The groups in the highest, the groups in the. Well, let's give the easy example. Let's give the example of what the paper didn't do, just so you can understand.
Yeah.
So what the paper could have done, again, this paper didn't do that, was we can say that we can get what the relative risk is for the highest consumers of red meat, studies that are like looking at red meat or consumption.
Yeah, and the lowest, and
the lowest. Yeah, and so we get a relative risk. And then what we can do is we can say, okay, let's look at studies with dietary patterns. And they maybe have more red meat on average in them, but that's just something that's correlated.
So, sorry, are we in both cases, so you're talking about getting a relative risk by looking at, who is adhering to this pattern a small percent of the time or a large percent of the time, and then doing a division. And I understand there's dividing the risk that, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you're talking about doing the same thing with consuming meat. And then what are we?
And then comparing the relative risk to each other.
Oh.
Which one's higher?
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Is the relative risk higher for when you divide high red meat consumption by low red meat consumption risk, or when you divide high adherence to dietary pattern by low adherence to dietary pattern?
Yes.
Risk?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I follow.
Okay. And now, by the way, they just also, to build on that, so they didn't do that comparison. They did the highest adherence to the dietary pattern compared to the lowest adherence to the dietary pattern. They got a relative risk for that. They compared that to not the highest red meat consumption to the lowest red meat consumption, but to a decrease of red meat consumption, a difference of red meat consumption by 3 servings per week.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not a highest to highest, lowest to lowest comparison.
Yeah, it's a highest to lowest and
Highest to lowest,
three times a
three
week.
ser- 3 servings a week comparison. That's what they did. Now the inference here was that if red meat is really causative to like vascular disease, mortality, cancer, then we would expect to see higher effect sizes in the studies directly tracking red meat, in this meta-analysis directly tracking red meat, rather than the meta-analysis that was done tracking dietary patterns.
Yeah.
That's the argument that's being made.
Which is sketchy.
Which is incredibly there's numerous problems, and we'll get into all the problems.
Well, you've laid that out as just a modus tollens here, so you're saying
Yeah.
if red meat likely causes problematic health outcomes, then red meat is associated with
Well,
problematic.
before we get to the modus tollens, let's quote. Let's make sure this is. We're going to quote the paper. Quote the authors. Quote: "We hypothesize that if red meat and processed meat were indeed causally related to adverse health outcomes, we would find stronger associations in studies that specifically addressed red meat and processed meat intake versus studies addressing dietary patterns." End quote. It would also quote. "In our assessment of causal inferences on unprocessed red meat and processed meat and adverse health outcomes, we found that the absolute effect estimates for red meat and processed meat intake were smaller than those for dietary pattern estimates, indicating that meat consumption is unlikely to be a causal factor of adverse health outcomes. We anticipated that if unprocessed red meat and processed meat was indeed a causal factor in raising the risk for adverse outcomes, the observed association between unprocessed red and processed meat and adverse outcomes would be greater in studies directly addressing the lowest versus highest intake of unprocessed red or processed meat versus studies in which meat was only one component of the dietary pattern." Now let's ignore the fact that they didn't actually look at studies addressing lowest versus highest intake of unprocessed meat. They did it for 3 servings. That's where they got their results from. But let's syllabize the argument. Okay, P1. If red meat likely causes problematic health outcomes, then red meat is associated with problematic health outcomes to a greater degree than dietary patterns are. Premise 2. So this is P implies Q.
Yep.
Premise 2. Red meat is not associated with problematic health outcomes to a greater degree than dietary patterns. It's not Q. Conclusion: red meat does not cause problematic health outcomes. It's not Q. So that's my modus tollens. Yeah. We're going to attack both premises. Well, premise 1 and premise 2. The easiest premise to attack is premise 1. It's like it just doesn't follow.
Why are we?
I don't see what's the argument. What's the argument for B implies Q?
Yeah.
So look, obviously.
Well, you don't ever have to provide supporting arguments for arguments. Why would you ever do that?
You need to provide a syllogism for this policy. Alright, okay. So if red meat causes, red meat can cause problematic health outcomes, and the dietary patterns can just cause more problematic health outcomes or do it to a greater degree. It doesn't follow that if red meat causes problematic health outcomes, then it would have to do so to a greater degree than certain dietary patterns. Also, they can interact in a synergistic manner. There's no argument for P1. There's no reason we would think it's more likely. Could be, if anything, it could be, for all we know, it could be more likely that's not. I have no idea. But it doesn't have anything to do with red meat being part of the causal pathway. If you can show that dietary patterns have a greater effect on it. Okay, maybe there are other worse things there. I don't know. Okay. I'm also going to reject the second premise. P2 is going to be rejected as well. It's a lot harder to reject P2.
And to be clear, you don't need to provide, like, it's a helpful, like, intuition point or whatever, but you don't need to provide counter options to P1. Like, you can just say, I just don't see a reason to accept this.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. I just don't see a reason to accept it.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, providing the counter offers is like that's
And by the way, I'm going to say the same thing too. I don't see a reason to accept it as well. But in order to say that I don't see a reason to get into, I'm going to have to go very empirical and show that their reasons for accepting P2, their data for accepting P2 actually doesn't actually get to the P2. Alright, so their supporting meta-analyses, there were 5. Several are going to be taken off the table real quick.
Yeah.
So the first is the effect of lower versus higher red meat intake on cardiometabolic and cancer outcomes, a systematic review of randomized trials. So this is the top of the evidence hierarchy, but this is actually the worst meta-analysis. The reason is it's not actually a meta-analysis of randomized clinical trials of lower versus higher red meat. No such trial was actually included in the meta-analysis. The trials were looking at low-fat versus high-fat outcomes, and that was just a proxy, something that correlated to meat consumption. This effectively makes the meta-analysis fall in the category of a dietary pattern rather than an analysis involving meat directly. This would be fine if the authors actually classified it as such and used it as a dietary pattern in their comparison, but they did not. Furthermore, the serving size of red meat only amounted to a reduction of 1.4 servings per week, compared to the standard of 3 servings per week in the comparative studies directly examining red meat. Also, by the way, after they weeded out all the trials they didn't like, they only ended up with 1 trial. I believe it was the Women's Health Initiative trial.
You're cutting out.
Yeah. Am I cutting out? Am I?
You were there now.
Okay, cool. Alright. So basically the problem with this meta-analysis is it actually just falls into the category of an indirect measurement. You're actually measuring a dietary pattern rather than red meat consumption.
Yeah.
And so that would be okay if they put it into the dietary category and compared it, but they didn't do that. You're not actually, and it didn't track with a great degree of red meat anyway. Okay.
It's long and sketchy.
The second paper.
Let's just make sure I understand this. So you'd want that to be classified. Well, wait, it's not like it could even be classified in the other. 1 second. So you're classifying them either as tracking red meat or as tracking dietary pattern. And
Yes.
you put it in the dietary pattern category, because it's not directly tracking red meat, it's tracking fat, basically. High fat, low fat.
Right.
Right, okay, alright, sure.
Oh, by the way, my hotspot allowance actually has 10% remaining for my data. So
Okay.
I'm gonna try. Yeah. So we might have to end it soon. But
Well, wait a
parts.
second. Yeah, and also that will give us the option to. I'll edit the video so that way, and I'll just upload it like unlisted or something.
So wait. I'm going to try to switch over to the connection here.
No. That connection is sketchy. That's.
No. It was sketchy when there were a lot of users, but it might not be sketchy.
Okay. Wait. Two things. So,
We'll just try.
We can try, but
Yeah.
this is actually what I'm thinking. I think because I'm also getting complaints on multiple platforms about the pausing. It seems to keep doing that. So what I think might be best actually, why don't we make it through NutraRex, and then I say that we call it there, and then we resume, and I'll actually just edit and upload the debate such that we can play it without it giving us that content ID bullshit that's pissing everyone off. So we can do the second half without that kind of annoying shit happening.
Right. Okay.
It'll make for a better stream anyway. And I mean, we are how far? We're about halfway. So this is pretty much what happened last time. Hey guys, we're gonna go for fucking 14 hours. Actually, we're gonna go for half of that.
By the way, we could have done it if I didn't run out of data.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible I would have died, but. Okay, so do we have enough to make it through NutraRex?
Yeah, let's go.
Keep in mind, people have been super chatting, so you don't want to let those people down.
Oh, yeah.
Let's,
Let me just.
let's just make sure to reload the super chat thing so you see all of them. If there's a lot, then let's just do that. If there's
No,
just,
let's just make sure we get the few.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll start. So, Hirani says, donates to, I think it's yours. It says for your organic duckweed.
Mm.
Stephen Anthony Jolly says, may I be unbanned in Discord?
no fucking idea who that is.
I don't know who that is. Yeah.
Go
But
talk,
thank you for
go
the
talk
donation.
to the mods, like literally
Talk about
everyone
that.
else.
I don't even know which Discord you're talking about. Are you talking about my Discord or are you talking about Aspersoft Discord?
I mean, there's a higher probability we're talking about
Yeah.
Mm.
Stephen Anthony Jolly donated again, $1.99. Thank you. Says at Banana Warrior Princess cannot find Discord server. Wow.
Okay, it's not very pertinent. We appreciate the donation, but yeah, let's stick to on topics.
Eli Powell donates $2. Says yuck. Snail octopus. Okay.
Thanks for reading the emojis. That is important.
SIP donated $5. Says thanks for doing this, Avi. You're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome from fucking the other guys sitting here for 6 hours. Just kidding.
Nick Kazmarek donates $1.99. Says, would you be willing to debate Logan Blake again? Absolutely. I've extended an offer to him.
Yeah, there was something weird that happened there. Like, basically, I told Logan Avi's happy to debate him. Initially, he didn't want to, but he came by the Discord looking to debate Avi, and that was when Avi was doing the, like, helping works out and stuff, and he was focused on building up this very stuff that we're going through now. So you can see what a task it was. So I think Logan thought Avi was trying to, snub him and let you mind reading there, but that's not the case. Like, if you see how much fucking work this took, it's just that he got caught up and he has to prioritize, right? That was on a deadline to help him out for the debate. But, we can certainly clear time, we'll record it, we'll put it up on the archive. So, yeah, just come by the server, just let us know and we can set up a time.
Jesus Ice says, thanks so much for doing this, Avi. Love you, buddy, my dude. $20. Thank you so much for the donation. Love you too, buddy, my dude. Nick says, thanks for all that you two have done and continue to do. From Strawbaby and I. Strawbaby and Nick. Our vegan couple right there.
They actually couple? I barely remember Strawbaby. Wait, Nick Kazmarek or listen?
No, neither.
What? Oh, I don't fucking know.
No, okay, you don't know that.
I can remember Strawbaby from like a long time ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember her personality.
No, it's like Nick and Strawbaby. They're like the power vegan couple right there. Yeah. They're like they're two mods in my Discord, dude.
I'm out of the loop.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick, the guy with the I know who Nick is actually. Yeah, I've seen his use.
Yeah. Alright. Cool, we made it through the okay.
Okay. What's your hotspot?
Oh wait, we have more.
Yeah, they do that. Sometimes you're like, oh, we're reading super chats.
And now they decided to Caleb Business Owner says, love you, buddy, my dear $2. Love you too, buddy, my dear Caleb. Nicole, another power vegan couple. Hold on. This is great to drink my smoothie. $2. Thank you, Nicole. I'm happy you're drinking smoothie as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we, had you point out, James pointed out that it is a ship.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see if let's keep going as far as we can go.
Okay. How much do you have left on your hotspot?
I don't know if it will just keep going.
What's it say?
I don't know. Let's see. 4G smartphone has 10% remaining on its monthly 15 gigabyte mobile hotspot allowance. Your hotspot will reset in the first. I mean, look,
10% is fine. Let's get through Nuturex and then let's call it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm going back to. Okay. Nuturex. Let's fucking do it. We're at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the paper. Okay. The second paper.
Yeah,
so the second meta-analysis.
We're a bit all over the place here, so we need to. Okay. So.
The second paper.
Yeah.
Take off
But let's just remind everyone of the frame. Okay. So we got basically going through all this. We syllogize the argument for paper, right? Red meat's likely to cause problematic health outcomes, and red meat is associated. Red meat likely causes problematic health outcomes, and red meat is associated with problematic health outcomes to a great degree than dietary patterns are. It's P implies Q. Premise 2, red meat is not associated with problematic health outcomes to a greater degree than dietary patterns are, not Q. Conclusion. Therefore, red meat does not likely cause problematic health outcomes. So that's therefore not P. Forms modus ponens. Obviously, with the formal argument, you're just going to say that if you accept the premises, you're committed to the conclusion. You want to reject it, you have to reject one premise at minimum. You reject two. So obviously, the first one, no idea what the fuck the argument is supposed to be for that. So, give us an argument for the argument if you're not a foot soldier. And then premise 2, we're getting empirical about it. They're claiming that there's not red meat is not associated with problematic health outcomes to a greater degree than dietary patterns. We're going through the studies that show that's the case and raising issues with them. So the problem with the first study, what was the problem with the first study? It was mischaracterized, or misclassified as being a red meat study, but it was actually looking at fat, which is a proxy for meat, so it should have been classified as dietary patterns. So that's issue number 1, and then we're on number 2 right now. This is all going towards rejecting Q.
And also, it didn't even look at a high. It was only 1.4 servings, and it resulted in one trial. And then the second paper to take off is the health-related values and preferences regarding meat consumption and mixed methods systematic review. This paper simply examined people's belief about meat and if they liked the taste of meat, and if they valued it, if they thought it was healthy. They found that people liked the taste of meat. They thought it was healthy. It was important for them. But it didn't look at health outcomes. I'm not sure, or how they relate to red meat. And I'm not sure why this is relevant to the comparative analysis of the health effects of directly measured red meat compared to dietary pattern proxies. I'm also not sure.
What? It just looked at their beliefs?
Oh yeah, you want to open the paper? Yeah, it's pretty funny.
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, open the paper.
Health-related values and preferences regarding meat consumption. What? So it's not finding any health outcome data. It's just
finding data about their preferences.
What?
To identify and evaluate evidence addressing health-related values and preferences.
Okay, that's fucking weird. So why is that being? That's insane. Because that seems like too obvious a problem. Like, how is that a thing? How could they be including something?
19.1762 in the citation. Four address consumption services studies report that omnivore is going to be meat. 18 report that these substances will be in the components of the diet.
Yeah, who the fuck cares about this?
I know.
How is this relevant to whether the association with red meat? Yeah. Okay, so that's fucked. Why I don't even know why that's.
Let's just take that off.
It reminds me of like a Discord thing when someone's citing like random garbage at you. Like, oh, that doesn't support your at all. Yeah. So Harvard actually did a summary of the 3 remaining meta-analyses that actually did look at outcomes. So this is where we're going to spend most of our empirical work on. So the Vivui 2019 paper was a meta-analysis of dietary patterns. So there's a Rakhtar 2019 and Khan 2019 meta-analysis directly examining the. So let's go over the screenshot, summary of the 3 meta-analyses. Okay. Pretty small.
So, okay. So follow along in the Discord if you want to. So the Vivui paper was the dietary pattern, and they found total mortality. That's the incident, 0.87. And they also gave the absolute risk reduction. The absolute risk reduction.
One second. I'm just banning mods. Don't unban that race letter guy. Fuck this guy. Okay. Sorry. Go on.
They also gave the absolute risk reduction, and this is in a metric in terms of 1,000 people. So what that is with this given relative risk, the absolute risk comes out to be a difference of 15 in this case per 1,000 people. So if we look through all of these metrics, so total mortality, cardiovascular mortality, total cancer mortality, cardiovascular disease incidence, total cancer incidence, type 2 diabetes incidence, you can see that the effect sizes are greater for the dietary patterns than for actually looking at 3 servings of red meat unprocessed or processed per week. Are you following?
No, I'm trying to observe.
Okay.
Let me make sure I'm following this. Well, actually, I mean, I guess we're just going to so walk me through this.
Yeah, sure. So if we look at, we know what the relative risks are. These are the relative for total mortality, cardiovascular mortality, total cancer, CVD, and skull cancer, and type 2 diabetes. And they're being split up comparing these 2 studies. So the Han study looked at cancer metric for 3 servings of red meat. The Zirakar study looked at cardiovascular metrics for 3 servings of red meat. And the Bernoulli paper looked at dietary patterns. And the effect sizes were stronger for the dietary adherence patterns for these metrics overall than for the 3 servings of red meat.
Right, okay.
For the same metric.
Yeah.
Now, just looking at the relative risks and absolute risk reductions, would you agree with that?
I didn't look at the numbers, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's
So that,
in
yeah,
line
it
with
comes out.
their, yeah,
Yeah, it comes out to be
supportive of two
So, as we can see, the effect sizes are indeed greater in the dietary pattern analysis than the direct analysis of red meat. However, the weighted average serving size difference of red meat consumption is not 3 servings per week in the dietary pattern analysis.
Wait one second. I don't know if my brain's just not working. The weighted average serving size difference of weekly red meat consumption is not 3 servings per week in the dietary pattern analysis. It's important because it could be. I guess I'll let you continue.
This is, so what do you understand what that means? Like, for example,
Yeah.
if you were to weight, there's more, the dietary patterns analysis actually comes out to be more than 3 servings of red meat. This is important because it could be that the reason greater effect is in the dietary pattern analysis and the red meat analysis is simply because the dietary pattern comparisons involve a greater reduction of red meat or greater difference of red meat than the red meat direct comparisons in the first place.
Wait, which is not to say that dietary patterns have a larger effect in virtue of what being dietary patterns. It's just in virtue of being a larger red meat reduction.
Yeah, exactly. It's a larger red meat reduction.
Yeah, well, it's not that is the case. That's a possible explanation.
Yeah, it's a
That
possible.
makes
It's
sense.
a possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So then as long as that's a possible explanation on the table, we don't have a reason to accept it.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Okay.
So from the Louis paper, among the 27 studies reporting on red meat intake, unprocessed, unspecified enriched, the difference between extreme adherence categories was less than 2 servings per week in 6 studies, 2 to 5 servings per week in 17 studies, and more than 5 servings per week in 4 studies. In the 19 studies reporting intake on processed meat, the difference between extreme adherence categories was less than 2 servings per week in 4 studies, 2 to 5 servings per week in 13 studies, and more than 5 servings per week in 2 studies. Now notice what they do here. Notice that they don't actually give you a weighted average for how many servings difference the totality of evidence is. They just split up and they say 2, and they don't, when they say 2, they have the 2 to 5 servings per week category. They don't, they have the tail ends around 3. They don't tell you if it was over or below 3.
Okay.
So what I decided to do was just go through every single individual study that these methods and table out. So let's do it. So let's go to that screenshot. This Excel file. So I don't know if you can over here.
I just will never understand. Okay. So yeah. All right, I'm looking at it. I got it open.
All right. So what I did is I just pulled the studies the same way that they did. I listed the studies, and then I listed the serving size differences in the highest versus lowest category dietary patterns, and I split it up based on red meat, serving size differences of unspecified red meat, and serving size of mixed red meat, and serving size of unprocessed red meat. Now, I also looked at the number of participants in the study, and that was N, the M column. So I used that to calculate a weighted average. I calculated a weighted average for all of these different categories. categories of serving size difference for processed red meat, serving size difference for unspecified red meat, serving size difference for mixed red meat, and serving size difference for unprocessed. Okay. So now we can keep going. So what did I find? In the dietary pattern analysis, the weighted average for each category of meat cannot be involved. For processed red meat, it came out to be 3.4 servings per week, 13% more red meat consumption than 3 servings per week. For unprocessed red meat, it was 3.59 servings per week, 20% more red meat consumption difference. For mixed red meat, it was 3.24 servings per week, which is only an 8% red meat consumption increase. Now here's the kicker. Most of the red meat that was not processed fell into the, quote, red meat not specified category. So the proportion of how much processed versus unprocessed red meat determines the serving size. Nutrax defined their serving size as follows. And I'll grant them this because this is fairly consistent. So again, remember that a serving size isn't the same amount of mass or calories for a given type of food. So for processed red meat, it's accepted generally that a serving size of processed red meat is 50 grams. Mixed red meat was taken to be 100 grams. And unprocessed red meat is 120 grams per serving. Red meat that was not specified could theoretically be anywhere between 50 grams and 120 grams. Because in a ridiculous scenario where it's all processed, it would be 50. In a ridiculous scenario where it's all unprocessed, it would be 120. And it could be anywhere in between. Yeah, it could be 100. It could be if it's mixed, but if it's mixed and it's so mixed so that it's almost all processed versus almost all unprocessed, it wouldn't make sense to use 100. All right. So if we assume an unrealistic steal meat and say that all of the unspecified red meat was unprocessed, we get a serving size difference of 3.27 servings per week, which is 9% more red meat consumption. If we assume that the unspecified red meat had the same processed to unprocessed ratios as the mixed red meat category, we would get a serving size, so that would be using 100 grams for a serving size. We would get a serving size difference of 3.92 servings per week, which is 30.6% more red meat consumption. If we assume equal processed and unprocessed red meat in unspecified red meat for an average serving size of 85 grams, so what I did was I just said, okay, well, the average difference between one to the other. We get a serving size difference of 4.61 servings per week, which is 53.6% more red meat consumption difference in the dietary pattern. And if we assume an unrealistic straw man, that all the unspecified red meat was processed, we get a serving size difference of 7.85. Okay. So I gave all of the values. I said, here's what we would expect for an unrealistic steal man, here's what we would expect for everything in between, here's what we would expect for unrealistic straw man.
Yeah, just the kind of a fair equal medium. It's like 53% more red meat. Standard.
Yeah. Theoretically, the serving size difference for unspecified red meat can be anywhere between 3.27 and 7.85 servings per week, but I suspect the true value is closer to 3.92 to 4.61 servings per week. So it'd be between like around 30 to 50% more red meat consumption. In any case, across the board, the dietary, this is for everything, for processed, unprocessed, the dietary pattern comparison resulted in more red meat intake than the direct red meat comparison when you do the weighted average. Because look, for processed it was 3.4. For unprocessed, everything was above 3.
I got you.
So therefore, it may not be surprising to see greater effect sizes in the dietary pattern compared to direct meat comparison. It's simply not an apples-to-apples comparison. It could just be that the effect sizes are greater in virtue of having more red meat. Not because they're in virtue of following a different dietary pattern.
So, this I'm trying to tie this back to P2 now.
Yeah. So let's go back to P2. So P2 is red meat is not associated with problematic health outcomes to a greater degree than dietary patterns taught. So the point here is that if you were to make an apples-to-apples comparison, and you were to look at dietary adherence when red meat is equalized, the degree of red meat difference is equalized, then that may not be the case. It might not be the case that
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, okay, all right. So, yes, that's just taking risks and is not good for this study. Oh wait, no, but this is what you get when you pool those. Wait, 1 second. I'm a bit lost with where these results are came from. Was this all from one study, or is this you pooling the results for all?
I pulled the individual primary literature papers.
Okay, so even when you pool them all, you get. See, I'm not totally tracking this. So the problem, you're saying the problem is that it's not apples to apples. What would apples to apples look like?
Apples to apples would look like. Here's what apples to apples would look like. Apples to apples would look like on my view, it would look like you would compare the highest dietary adherence to the lowest dietary adherence. And you would compare that to the highest red meat intake to the lowest red meat intake.
Yeah, okay. And this is not apples to apples.
No, because not only is it not looking at the two factors comparing highest to lowest, it's also taking the first factor and placing it into itself.
Inside, yeah. Okay, so
the point is, P2 that says red meat is not associated with problematic health outcomes to greater degree dietary patterns are, it could very well be that it is associated.
Yeah, because you know,
to a greater degree.
So let me see if I can say this right, because I think I may understand, I'm not 100% sure. So the issue is you can't say that red meat is associated to a lower degree with these outcomes than dietary patterns when your investigation of dietary patterns, if you actually look into it, is also could potentially just be could be higher, could be more highly correlated with those outcomes in virtue of having increased
red meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't say that great, but I think I get the idea.
Yeah.
So basically, you're not actually finding out if dietary patterns are more correlated with these outcomes than red meat, because the red meat is like in the dietary pattern, basically.
Yeah,
it's like
and it's
you're
to
not
a greater,
separate.
it's to a greater, and it's in there to a greater degree than the red meat comparison.
Yeah. Okay. I think I basically get that. Yeah. So maybe by analogy, like you can't find out if bikes or motorcycles are better. So, you know, like traveling a given distance, if you like include motorcycles in the bike category.
Bike category.
is that
to
like,
a greater degree than even motorcycles.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's pretty funny. So yeah, that's a good basis for saying fuck P2 and P1 is just sketchy. So this Nutrirex thing is sketchy.
Yeah.
You want to do a final super?
No, we're not done. We're not done. We have 3 more Nutrirex sections.
Oh shit. Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. How are we on? I'm worried about your Wi-Fi. How's the Wi-Fi?
Am I still coming in? Look,
No, I mean the hotspot. How's?
I don't know. It's not. I haven't gotten any text, so I'll just keep going until it runs out.
All right. Let's try.
Yeah, and you're still streaming, so you can read the super chats if I.
No, I'm not in your account.
Oh, okay. I will send them to you.
Okay.
Nutrirex relative risks and effect size.
Oh yeah, I'm there.
So another issue that they mentioned was that the effect size were very low. So they called it minuscule. So let's examine what happens instead of comparing 3 servings per week of red meat versus 3 servings per week difference of red meat versus the highest and lowest tiers of dietary patterns. And let's compare the highest and lowest red meat consumption to the highest and lowest tiers of dietary patterns. So you're following?
Yep. Oh, I'm following. Yeah, you're comparing highest and lowest red meat to the highest and lowest dietary pattern difference.
Right. Yeah. Now I calculated this.
And these are your numbers here in this little screenshot I've got?
Yeah, these are my numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I took this from the supplementary table. So okay. So we have the first one here. So this is the same thing. And I had the relative risk, and then there's a slash. I have the absolute risk reduction there. And then we'll get into what cumulative absolute risk is. So what I did was, instead of comparing, I just compared the highest to lowest intakes and what those relative risks would be. And what I found was that for some metrics, like cardiovascular mortality, or cardiovascular disease, let's see, CVD mortality. Yeah, so for CVD mortality, some red meat actually was, not all, but some red meat actually did have a greater effect size. So
Oh, wow.
if you look at mixed red meat, which was mixed red meat, that was at 0.83 as an effect size compared to 0.86 for the lowest to the highest. Now I'm granting that I'm granting that I'm cherry picking the mixed red meat, but in some cases it actually doesn't matter. And the other things are actually pretty similar. The unprocessed red meat was 0.88. The processed red meat was 0.88, and compared to 0.86. So technically, but it's very, very similar. For total mortality, the numbers, collapse to a great degree. They get much closer to each other.
Sure. Yep.
For total cancer incidence, the unprocessed red meat was actually had a greater effect size, even though it wasn't statistically significantly different. The effect size was greater. And then, for whatever it's worth, I included the low risk of bias studies only, bias studies as defined by how these same authors define them. And they gave criteria to when to use those, and in most cases they didn't apply. But for whatever it's worth, if you only include low risk of bias studies, they actually they would be more likely to have a greater effect size than the dietary patterns.
Wow. Yep.
So in some cases, when you do this comparison, you actually do get a greater effect. It's not clear that overall.
Not that that's even meaningful anyway, because P1.
Yeah, but it's actually, P2 doesn't actually become very. P2 isn't really clear.
Yeah.
It's not in every case. Yeah. Okay. And now, why are the effect sizes so low? Why is it that? So here's the thing. Go open the thing again. Open that check.
Yep, I got it.
If you notice the absolute risk reductions for total cancer mortality, total cancer incidence, have you ever noticed that they're higher than the absolute risk reduction of like 5.8? For total cancer mortality is like 11.6 out of 1,000. CVD mortality is 5.8. You would think red meat would be more associated with cardiovascular disease, or cardiovascular mortality than cancer mortality. I mean, am I wrong about that? Would you have the when you say like red meat is problematic? I mean, we've heard it's cancer, but what do you think is more problematic for heart disease or cancer?
Yeah, I mean, you think CBD? I mean, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, CBD. I think it's CBD too. And I was surprised to see the cancer absolute risk reductions to be higher than the cardiovascular issue, and there's a reason for that. So, here's why. It should also be noted that the effect size for CVD is low compared to the effect sizes for cancer, since they used a lifetime risk analysis for cancer, but only a 10.8-year risk analysis for CVD.
Oh, okay, so way higher likelihood than that. Okay,
Yeah.
That's
So from the paper, quote, we calculated the risk difference by multiplying the pooled relative risk reduction from the meta-analysis by the population risk for cancer incidence and mortality. The Global Cancer Statistics, GLOCAN, produced by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, provided the cumulative risk for developing or dying of cancer before age 75 years using age-specific incidence and mortality rates based on 184 national populations. We use these rates to estimate the population of the lifetime. So here's they posted that, and I think that it came to about somewhere between 10 or 18 for incidence, and like 10 point something for mortality. And they just multiplied the relative risk by that absolute risk. baseline risk. And then they got the answer as a risk from 80 to 75.
Yeah, but
Basically.
but the fucking problem
Yeah.
is like they're not. Maybe there's another problem, but they're not like actually really seeing throughout someone's lifetime what's the risk. They're like doing a kind of like they're making some kind of inference there, basically.
Yeah.
Doing like a multiplication based on.
Yeah, they're making an inference. They're making an inference. But really to the point is they're not doing the same sort of inference with cardiovascular disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
For cardiovascular disease, the 10.8-year paper comes from, I cited the paper in supplement for where it comes from if anyone wants to look it out, because I calculated it. I made sure the numbers came out right when I calculated it. If we calculated CVD mortality and absolute risk reduction magnitude based on a lifetime risk, just like they do with the cancer measure, so apples to apples, we get substantially higher magnitudes.
Oh.
I use the following data to calculate. So I use this New England Journal of Medicine paper to calculate to establish a baseline risk. And quoting from this paper, the lifetime risks of death from cardiovascular disease in the pool cohort were higher among men than among women, but were similar between blacks and whites. White men 36.1%, black men 33.0%, white women 22.6%, black women 27.1%. To steel man the red meat side, I took the lower values for both men and women and averaged them so that slight sex imbalances wouldn't likely offset my estimate to the point where I would be overestimating the total risk. The overall risk came out to be 29.8%, which makes sense since the average cumulative risk of cardiovascular disease mortality is about 30%. I added the ARRs based on the lifetime risk in the table. As we can see, the ARR magnitudes are now substantially larger than the lifetime success. So let's scroll all the way back up. Go to the screenshot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so total, now go to the CVD mortality, and you see the number all the way to the right-hand side? That's what the, yeah, so that's,
Sorry, all the way to the right-hand side, the CVD
Yeah.
mortality, there's
Yeah.
a bunch of ways.
yeah, so you see 5.8, you see 41.7?
Yes, yep,
Yeah.
okay, yep.
So 5.8 is the 10.8-year absolute risk reduction. That's 5.8 less people out of 1,000 people are going to die in 10.8 years.
Yeah.
But if we do it for a lifetime, if we do that over the course of a lifetime, 5.8 becomes 41.7. So, and then the same thing goes down the list.
Yeah.
So if we actually do the lifetime risk, just like they did it with lifetime risk for cancer, then the magnitude of the effect sizes that they said were so small get multiplied by a factor of somewhere between 5 to 10.
Oh shit. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
That's pretty fucking substantial.
yeah.
Tenfold that.
5 to 10 tenfold. Yeah, it's around 7. Okay, a factor of 10. Yeah.
Pretty intense, yeah, okay.
Okay, so now let's go to Nutrarex. Okay, so the point of this is saying that they were saying that the effect size is low. The effect size is low because they didn't do an apples-to-apples comparison for the effects of cardiovascular disease.
Yeah.
They only looked, they didn't do lifetime risk, they did 10.8.
Yeah, and if you adjust it appropriately, then the effect size turns out to be
Yeah.
normal.
Effect size become much better. Nutrarex grades up.
Alright.
Okay, so a grade is a system by which we can determine how certain we are based on evidence. It can be found in best practice. Let's actually click on it. Best practice BMJ recommend. Yeah. No. Go to the table 1.
Okay, table 1.
So here's what it means. So when it says very low, it just means the true effect is probably markedly different than the estimated effect. Low, the true effect may be markedly different from the estimated effect. Moderate, the authors believe that the true effect is probably close to estimated effect. And high is the authors have a lot of confidence the true effect is similar to the estimated effect. Now, the way grade works is that studies that are randomized controlled trials start off as a high grade. Studies that are epidemiological prospective cohort studies start off as low. Not very low, but start off as low.
Okay.
And there are certain criteria by which you can upgrade or downgrade the evidence by up to two categories.
Okay.
So high could be downgraded to low,
Yeah.
very low could be upgraded to low. Now, it is subjective, but there are still certain criteria by which you can upgrade or downgrade. One way is risk of bias. We don't have to fully go into that because I don't have a contention with the way the authors did that. Another way is imprecision. So, imprecision would be if the 95% confidence interval around the best estimate of the absolute effect, it's imprecision regarding that. Certainty is lower as the clinical decision is likely to be different if the true effect is at the upper versus lower end of the confidence interval. So let's say you have a targeted treatment effect, and even though there's a statistically significant effect, for the targeted treatment effect, the confidence interval overlaps it. You would say that that's imprecise. And that's one of the reasons rated down. Another one is inconsistency, when there are several studies that show inconsistent effect when considering whether or not it should be rated down. So one thing you could do is look for heterogeneity. The I-squared test is the test for heterogeneity. I should have gone over that when we went over forest ball. The other thing you can rate down for is indirectness. Indirectness is one of the things we mentioned, actually, that looking at, and they did rate this down for indirectness, to their credit, was that they looked at the randomized clinical trial looked at fat.
Yes,
Instead of
not
meat.
directly.
So you're indirectly looking at something.
Correct.
Now they shouldn't have just rated down for indirectness. They should have also categorized it differently because it's also a dietary
Yes.
pattern.
Yeah.
And then publication bias. Okay. So what is increases? When would you upgrade the evidence? Reasons to rate certainty evidence. In some cases, so evidence can be rated up as well. So the criteria for that is, one, when there is a very large magnitude effect. I don't necessarily agree. It depends what you mean by large magnitude. If you mean absolute magnitude, then yes, I agree. If you mean relative risk, not necessarily. We went over why.
Yeah.
Second, when there is a clear dose-response gradient. This is the point of contention I have. Third, when residual confounding is likely to decrease rather than increase the magnitude of effect. So they basically say, hey, you didn't control for these confounders. And then you say, well, listen, and based on everything we know about these confounders, if we did control for them, our findings would be even more supportive.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so those are the three main. There's some more ones, but those are the main ones. So let's go back to the story. Okay? Because the thing is, they did find across the board, they did find dose-response relationship. Right. So, but my central issue with the grading of the evidence of uncertainty was that there was no upgrading for a dose-response effect.
Yeah.
Even though that's part of the grade guidelines. Now, here's what a lot of vegans are trying to make the case. A lot of vegans are trying to make the case that, well, they shouldn't be using grade guidelines. Grade guidelines are used as part of the pharmaceutical. It's a standard for pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
And for nutrition, you should use a different grade guideline for determining certain.
What's the reason for thinking that?
I don't know. I don't.
It's like, we don't like it, and it's normally used in another context. So bad.
Yeah.
Great.
I think they would say something along the lines of because with nutrition you have to study that for so long, you have to do these things that you just can't get good data the way you can with pharmaceuticals. But the fact that it's hard to get the data doesn't mean we should be more confident that the data is good.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah. So I actually don't see a symmetry breaker, and I disagree with all the vegan criticism of Nuturex that they shouldn't have used grade. I think they should have used grade.
You just think they should have done it correctly.
I think they should have applied grade correctly. I don't think they applied grade correctly. And I know that grade can come down to subjective judgment calls, but this one in my view was really out of part.
Yeah. Okay.
And I understand, by the way, that Gordon Guyatt was the guy who wrote the book on grade guidelines and how to do them, and he was also one of the authors of this paper. So that makes me even more amazed.
Yeah, because you have respect for that guy.
Yeah, I have. I mean, yeah, he wrote the grade guidelines. Practically wrote the grade guidelines that he did actually. Nothing in his guidelines say to not upgrade for dose response for the reasons that the author gave. So I mean, look, let's here's the quote.
What did they? Yeah. Okay.
Here's the quote. Complementing existing grade standards and to determine whether we should rate up for a dose-response effect.
They just modified the standards. What?
Yeah.
We assess the plausibility of a
Causal-
causal relationship between meat and adverse health outcomes by contrasting results from two bodies of evidence. Cohort studies specifically addressing red meat and processed meat intake, cohort studies addressing dietary patterns associated with varying red meat and processed meat consumption. We hypothesized that if red meat and processed meat were indeed causally related to adverse health outcomes, we find stronger associations in studies that specifically address red meat and processed meat.
So it's the same syllogism
Yeah, what?
for not upgrading the
So the reason for not upgrading the evidence is the fucking sketchy syllogism. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So, I mean, there's no mention of using
Wow.
this comparison as a means.
The part that annoys me is the use of the word complement. Like, complementing the standards by modifying them.
Complementing existing grades. Yeah, I love that. Oh, yeah.
It's like, look, I'm just
Complementing existing grades. I just noticed that. Holy shit.
I'm just complimenting the flavor of the cake by putting salt in it. It's like, what?
I love it. I just actually noticed that. You like quoted like
It's just funny language.
Use the existing that. Like they're making
It's
it
like,
clear,
like they should use a word like abusing or something.
yeah. At least they did that. At least they're being open. Like, hey, we're not using actual existing grade standards here.
Yeah, but it's
We're complementing the grade standards.
yeah, well, you know, we're complimenting. Yeah, okay, that's okay. That's silliness. So
Okay.
they modified the standards to not upgrade the dose-dependent studies with the goal of
Right.
conclusion, which we don't have to assume there's intent there. That's weird, obviously. And their basis for doing it was the sketchy syllogism.
The silly syllogism. Yeah. So basically, like, okay, now you're not now. So this is what even should be pointing out. What should be pointing out is that these authors actually didn't use grades. They used their complemented grade proprietary system.
We are not following them using the word complement.
Yeah.
They're using modified or shadow
Yeah.
on or something.
Yeah. They use a modified grade system by which you don't upgrade, by which we have new criteria for not upgrading dose response effects.
And did you by any chance, I guess you didn't do with the upgrading, let's see how it came out, eh?
No, we know how it would come out because the evidence was rated as very low to low, and if we upgraded one for one, it would come out to be low to moderate.
Wow, okay, alright.
Yeah. So at least say in some cases there's moderate evidence for this effect size. There's moderate certainty for this effect size for red meat and bad health outcome.
Okay.
Which is fair. Right. So anyway, there's no mention in the grade guidelines for this. They have been admitted it's complementing the grade guidelines. And this entrance is the same thing which we already went through. The authors can also conclude from the inference that, quote, using our findings in our assessment of the certainty of evidence, we did not rate up for dose response given the potential for residual confounding. That also is not a criteria for not rating up. Residual confounding is inherent in any prospective cohort study. Residual confounding is already accounted for in the first place by the fact that prospective cohort studies start below to a grade certainty rating in the first place. This is the quote from what we just read. Evidence from randomized controlled trials start at high quality, and because of residual confounding, evidence that includes observational data starts at low quality.
Wow,
It's already accounted for.
That's actually hilarious.
Yeah.
Wow.
So neither of these things. In one case, they actually admit they're using their own complementary grade system, and in the second case, they just pull something else out. They don't say they're complementing it, but that's not something that's a criteria for not upgrading for dose response. Now again, I know this can come down to the subjective value call in many cases, but we're not talking about like an effect size, like are we determining whether this effect size is too much worth this threshold? Like, no, we're not making a subjective call like that. We're just making shit up.
Yeah, this is hilarious. So the Nuturex paper is just, it's extremely bad. Like, there's a lot of problems. Like, it's really bad. Holy.
I think I want to keep going, actually. I don't want to stop.
I think, actually, that there's two reasons. There's the video cutout thing, which we should adjust, and there's the 10% thing. So, I think that, and we're halfway.
Let's ask the chat what they want.
Yeah, we can, but like, I mean, I think
I want to know. Chat.
Fixing these things, though.
Chat. Do you want us to stop and do this and do the second half another time, or do you want us to keep going and finish it up?
Finish.
What does they're saying the video hasn't cut out in a while?
Well, that's because we haven't.
That's because we're not playing. Yeah.
It'll do it the second we do it.
It'll start doing it when we play it. I mean, look, you'll get the recording. What do you want? Chat. Just vote if you okay. Okay. One to keep going. 2 to stop.
Well,
1 to keep going. 2 to stop. Everyone's saying keep going. It's pretty unanimous.
yeah. I honestly,
Look,
I think
if
I
can't do it, if I end up running out of data and the connection is too sketchy at my place, then we'll have to stop. But we're gonna based on what the chat wants. Yeah, we're gonna try it.
Wait, no. I think that I kind of want to lay down the law. I think that I do want to stop this one. I think we should pick it up, and we'll do it with the video edited, and we can do it with the Wi-Fi good, and it'll be better. Like I'm thinking that is a better choice. So then we're halfway. It's perfect. I think that right now this is a good place to call it. As much as I love it.
Oh man, I really want
No, let's call it here, and let's pick it up and do the rest then.
How long did we go for? We went for about 8 hours.
Yeah,
Just like last time.
Yeah, we should make sure there's no additional super chats.
Yeah, there's additional.
Okay.
Oh man, I want to keep going.
I know, but I think that's for now.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, donated another $2 Foot Soldier has a rockin' hard-on for Isaac.
I mean, he's just an idiot. He doesn't understand basic logic. He spends trying to avoid the obvious fact that name the trade is a sound argument. I destroyed him live in a first debate on my channel where he couldn't generate syllogism. I destroyed him the second time on Vegan Games channel where he wouldn't admit that he didn't have an argument for P4 or concede that the exponents meaning P4 was no reason to take a stand. And finally, I debated him in the server. He admitted that there's no argument for P4 and therefore that argument there's no reason to make it sound. Then he ended up conceding the entire argument is sound, and now he's just on some bullshit about the argument not being the argument. So, Foot Soldier's an idiot. He's conceded that the argument is sound. I wrecked him multiple times. Obviously muted him also. I don't know what that. Would you add anything to that, or is that basically, would you just give the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it's funny how, like, so many other, like, tangential people end up making it into
Okay, let's, and yeah, you know, if he ever sees this, I hope that you will love the feeling of that concession. You know, I'm sure it makes you very happy. Alright, let's,
when should we do, maybe we should do next week. I think next week maybe we should do,
yeah? I can make that easily. Something I'd like doing.
Alright, tune in next weekend for part 2.
Yep, and maybe spam.
But yeah, let's try to let's see if we can find a way to not get this copyright thing.
I can deal with that. I didn't know their algorithm's doing that now. We'll talk about that after. But yeah, fucking A. Okay, this was good work. We're halfway through. We'll do the other half later. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and that was a lot of useful info out there.
By the way, no drinks, no food, and no tea breaks.
I failed on. Alright, so we've got Dr. Avi, we've got Haleman. He's I think a carnivore YouTuber would be a fair way to characterize him. They're going to debate veganism. Might be about health, might be about ethics. We'll just see as we go. I'm just going to unmute them now, and then they'll be able to talk. Everyone else is muted.
Hey, how are you? Good, how are you? So, what's your position that you'd like to defend?
Well, what can I say? The vegan diet is trash. It made me anorexic, destroyed my digestion, and yeah, that's it.
It's the vegan, yeah, so your position is the vegan diet is trash and it made you anorexic. Is that your position? Oh, okay. And by trash, do you mean just inferior to the omnivore diet?
Carnivore.
Oh, inferior to the carnivore diet. Okay.
Yeah.
Not necessarily inferior to that. Okay. Is it just an anecdote that you have for that, or is there any evidence that you have that a vegan diet is inferior in any way to the carnivore diet?
I've got various studies talking about the various different toxins in plants and how they affect digestion.
Yeah, so when you talk about how they affect digestion, is there any outcome that's terminated in, or is it just saying this is a toxin by this whatever criteria, and this is what we speculate will happen?
Yeah, that's the thing. There is no sort of health. There is no sort of health outcome.
Yeah, and the reason
It's sort of mechanistic stuff.
Yeah, and the reason this is important is because when we look at these quote-unquote toxins and when we try to terminate them in outcomes, what we found is that a lot of these plants that have a lot of these quote-unquote toxins that was shunned mechanistically, when we look at the outcomes, they actually end up doing better. So a classic example was legumes. So legumes have these things a lot of people called anti-nutrients, and there was speculation that there would be problems with digestion because of it, especially in elderly populations that couldn't digest very well. But the issue is when they actually looked at the outcomes, they actually ended up having the lowest all-cause mortality when elderly populations ended up consuming legumes. So just because we have a mechanistic speculation all the time, many, many times, it turns out to be unreliable and doesn't actually pan out for the health outcomes. So do you have any evidence in terms of any health outcome that you could point to indicate that the diet you're advocating for is superior in any way? Or that the diet, or the vegan diet is inferior?
No health outcome data that would suggest the vegan diet is inferior. It just there's no studies that have been done, and nor can I say that an all meat-based diet would be superior either, because that hasn't been studied either. What I can say is from my own personal experience that vegan diet just didn't work out, and I have some mechanistic data to sort of explain why that happens.
Well, we already covered the mechanistic data and why that's very unreliable. Because there's mechanistic data. If you accept mechanistic data as a way of terminating outcomes without actually testing outcomes, and if you accept anecdotes to the same degree, I mean, you could basically argue for literally any diet under the sun with that criteria. So I can get any vegan in here to say, you know, when I went vegan, what happened was, you know, I got all these health benefits. I grew taller. The size of my penis increased. I got more money in my bank account. I mean, these are all things that happened when I went vegan. So, you know, right? You see the problem, right? It's just an anecdote.
Yeah, but the thing is, I trust my own anecdote. Like, it's my life. If my health is failing on a vegan diet, then of course I'm going to eat meat again.
Sure. Yeah. Have you considered that maybe you just? Yeah. Go ahead. Have you considered? Go ahead. Have you considered that you may have just done the vegan diet poorly, and on average, maybe this is something that actually is superior, or maybe you've done it. I mean, here's the issue. Like, when you say I'm going to trust my anecdote, your anecdote is very, very, very
limited,
unreliable on many, many factors. So the first factor your anecdote is unreliable on is on diseases that have high latency periods. So diseases that have high latency periods are things that an anecdote is very hard to get at because you would have to do a diet for a very long time in order to assess risk. And that's why these studies measuring outcomes are very useful. Because just you may feel good or you may have a certain feeling with a given diet, that doesn't actually tell you anything about high latency period diseases. So that's just one of the many issues with an anecdote.
Well, all I know is my current state of health is going to be the best indicator of my future health, and on a vegan diet, my health was going down the toilet, and so was many other people's.
Can you just tell me in what ways your health is going down the toilet, and how you know that your health is, in future health is?
Yeah, so the first thing was digestion, so obviously I was eating I pretty much tried everything on the vegan diet, all the different foods you can think of, supplements as well. there was some.
When you say digestion, what do you mean?
Your ability to absorb, digest, and assimilate food and the nutrients.
And that's been assessed by what? Like you've had blood work or what?
Yeah.
And what was your blood work? Like what
Basically, my kidneys, were fucked. My kidneys weren't really filtering properly.
As measured by what? A high creatinine?
Yeah.
A high. Well, that's very. And you went. What did your doctor say about your high creatinine?
Oh, he said it could be dehydration or something, but...
Yeah. That's not usually, unless there are certain specific preconditions with prior kidney disease. The only time I'm aware of like diets affecting your creatinine level and thus the calculated GFR is if you have pre-existing conditions for your kidney and you also consume like a lot of protein on top of that. You can do it. But other than that, it's really not related to the diet. Aside from that specific context,
it actually is related to the diet because
how so?
One of the biggest problems with kidney disease and kidney stones, and essentially 80% of kidney stones are from calcium oxalate, which can be produced by the body, but can also come from plants and oxalate-heavy rich foods like spinach and
greens.
Various grains.
Yeah, but there's no. But again, there's no. The only outcome-based evidence that kidney stones that are calcium oxalate actually form in higher rates, or kidney stones in general form in higher rates, are some data on ketogenic diets. But we're not. But this wasn't. But again, this is tangential because that wasn't your issue anyway. You didn't have a kidney stone, did you?
I didn't have a kidney stone, but I had.
Then why are you mentioning calcium oxalate kidney stones? The issue was a tangential issue. Yeah. The issue is you had a lower GFR. It wasn't a kidney stone. Well, that's just the tangential. That's just the tangential point.
Yeah, actually, oxalate can affect the kidney filtration by way of.
Of course it can, but that wasn't what you had.
Well, I can't say I know that for sure, but what I can say...
When people have a kid, I can tell you when people have a kidney stone, they know it. It is incredibly painful.
Yeah, I didn't have kidney stones. These oxalates are microscopic. You don't have to have a kidney stone to have oxaluria.
That's okay. Now you're talking about something else. Now you're talking about now you're talking about these small degrees of precipitation. So you can speculate that that's the case, but again, so then I'm just going to ask you, is there any evidence that you have that a vegan diet increases the rate of this happening?
Well, it's pretty, you just put 2 and 2 together, really.
No, that's not how this works.
And, if you overconsume spinach, then you probably increase your likelihood of getting kidney stones.
No.
And in fact, in a lot of kidney stone clinics, they will tell you to reduce your consumption of oxalate-rich foods. They'll get you to go on a low-oxalate diet.
Yeah, if someone has had if you had prior oxalate kidney stones, then sure. If you're talking about something which doesn't apply to you, and you don't even know that you've had these microscopic, small calcium oxalate precipitation degrees, and even if you did, you would just exclude oxalate-rich food from a vegan diet. You can have a vegan diet that is low in oxalate. So it's just tangential on 3 different factors. So the first factor is, number 1, you have no evidence that this actually applies to you. Number 2, even if it did apply to you, it wouldn't follow that you shouldn't go on a vegan diet from that. It would just follow that.
No evidence that it applies to me. I actually do. I got an ultrasound. I got my kidney function tested. And when I stripped oxalate-rich foods, my kidney function improved. And furthermore, when I...
No, that's not... No. That's not evidence. So here's what would be evidence. What would be evidence is, A, if you had an ultrasound, the ultrasound actually found the stone. B, if you actually did have the stone. C, the other issue is just because your GFR improved when you went on less oxalate-rich foods, it doesn't actually mean that was the oxalate causing that. It could just be that there was a covariant that... Hold on.
I'm saying that there's some evidence to suggest it.
That's not it's not suggested by it because the most common reason, I can tell you the most common reason for a lower GFR is hydration. It has nothing to do with oxalate. So you're hearing hoof prints, you're hearing hoof beats, and you're thinking about zebras instead of horses. The most common cause.
function.
Yes, they can. It's a possible. Sure. Listen. Yes, sure. That we can grant that. We can grant that. But you understand that it's the most likely explanation for that is still a change in hydration status.
Well, actually,
unless you can point.
More hydrated on a vegan.
And how do you know that? Did you look at? No, that's your speculation. Was there a specific gravity of your urine that was tested on the vegan diet and now?
No.
Okay. I mean, that's how you would check. You can check the specific gravity of your urine. I mean, you wouldn't do it by saying, well, there's more water in fruit, so I'm going to speculate that I was more hydrated. That's not how you do it. That's not going to get you anywhere.
I don't know.
So here's the case.
The thing is, I stopped oxalate-rich foods, my kidneys stopped hurting, and...
Right, but you understand, but you understand that just because you stop the oxalate-rich foods doesn't because you stop the oxalate-rich foods. The most common, based on our understanding, the most common reason a GFR can improve is, and GFRs do improve after they're lower, is because of hydration. That is by far the most common reason that changes. It's not because of this microscopic oxalate precipitation. That's a lot lower. It can happen, but it's a lot lower on the chain in terms of common explanations for why, or likely explanations for why that happens. And moreover, do you even have a history of having any kidney stones at all? Have you ever had a kidney stone? Okay, so you have no history of having a kidney stone. I just don't see why you would speculate that this was this microscopic calcium oxalate crystallization rather than the most common explanation by and large.
There's a few reasons. One, the most prominent reason was because I did get an ultrasound and it did show increased echogenicity of the right kidney, which usually highlights calcium deposits as well.
Did they see any calcium deposits? What was the read of the ultrasound?
I didn't see, they just saw increased echogenicity, which could mean calcium, it could mean increased fat. But it usually just means inflammation.
Yeah, I mean, so that's very inconclusive. I mean, we can posit your kidneys were inflamed. We can posit your kidneys had fat. We can posit there was increased echogenicity. That's a non-specific finding.
Right.
So they didn't find any. Did they find any focal echogenicity? The increased echogenicity that would be consistent with the calcium stone. So, like, we're looking at a stone. Increased focal echogenicity, or was there just diffuse increased echogenicity? Did you just have ATN? I mean, if it was just... Right, I mean, you could have just had acute tubular necrosis or something, like, for all I know. And that could account for increased echogenicity. I mean, it doesn't sound like there was this focal increased echogenicity that you would see with a calcium stone, was there? Because then it would be suggestive, the read would be very suggestive of the stone if that was the case.
Well, I know I didn't have stone. I'll just say that I wasn't 100% sure I had an oxalate problem, but I had symptoms.
You had symptoms of what?
Oxalate toxicity.
What were those symptoms of oxalate toxicity?
Pain in kidney, rashes, digestion issues. Itchiness.
Yeah, but you know those are things that can be caused by so many different things.
This is why it's not being talked about. It's because it's not really being studied all that much.
No, kidney oxalate stones are very well studied. It's not that they're not studied. It's just that there was no evidence for you having this. When you look at diffuse echogenicity, I'm really skeptical that there was focal echogenicity. The read would have been very suggestive of an oxalate stone or a kidney stone, if that was the case. But the point being here is that even if we grant all of this, like this is, I mean, the point being is that this is an anecdote and really doesn't make the case for, even if everything is granted, which I'm not going to grant, this would just end up being an anecdote, and it wouldn't make the case that the vegan diet is somehow inferior. It would just mean you had a bad experience on it. So, again, what's the evidence?
Like, do you want studies or something?
Yes, that's exactly what you're
There's
being
so
asked
many.
for.
There's about 20 studies that I have that show that
We can go through them one by one.
quite a few nutrients.
All right. Do you want to present them?
No.
Yeah, just give me a sec. I might have got a post in the chat or something. Okay. Nutrients you can't get from plants. Okay. So there's vitamin A. Basically, fat soluble vitamin.
Wait. Let's go one by one. So you have so vitamin A. You gonna post something there?
There you go.
Okay, that's not one by one. That's 4 studies, but. All right. Is there a specific point in these studies that you would like to point out? I mean,
Yeah,
what's the
We don't convert beta carotene to vitamin A very well. Most of us.
Mm-hmm. Are you aware of the conversion rate of beta carotene to vitamin A and how much beta carotene one would need to get RD burn?
I think it was something like the 50% of people in the UK.
You think it was what? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
I don't remember exactly. I haven't read these studies. I just kind of keep them there.
So you're posting studies. Are you posting studies that you just haven't read? You just keep them there and post them?
No, I've read them. I just don't remember them.
Oh, you don't remember? Okay. So basically, you don't need nearly as much as people make it out to be. And here's the data for that. So one can always go for. There's different conversion rates for different foods, but the easiest way to do it is just to take a multivitamin that has beta carotene, synthetic beta carotene. 25 milligrams will be enough, even if you have about a 75% impairment in conversion. You will get RDF retinol without a problem, and here's the data for that.
Yeah, but what if you don't want to take pills?
If you don't want to take pills, if you don't want to take pills, what you can do is there are certain foods that you can eat, like sweet potatoes, that have a fairly high conversion rate. So sweet potatoes, you need like 1 or 2 cups. Sweet potatoes are full of.
They're super high in oxalates. They're dangerous, potentially.
Okay. Do you have any evidence that
like someone like me would not be able to eat sweet potatoes? I would have a negative reaction.
The other option would be carrots. Let's see. Yeah, carrots would be another option. Also, there doesn't seem to be any harm by taking this
multivitamin. You have to eat to get the adequate amount of vitamin A. You would have to eat an exorbitant amount. It would be realistic.
It wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be as exorbitant as people make it out to be, and we can go through the calculus. But more to the point, before we circle back on that, I just want to point out that there's actually no harm in consuming 25 milligrams of synthetic beta-carotene. When in that dose, there's no increase in all-cause mortality. Then what?
Then why isn't it bioavailable?
Well, it is bioavailable.
Well, it's obviously not for some reason. If
Well,
most
no,
of the population can't.
It is by, in other words, if you take 25 milligrams of synthetic beta-carotene, you'll be able to convert enough retinol. And there wouldn't be any side effect of that. There wouldn't be any increase in all-cause mortality. And there's no evidence for a problem of morbidity either.
It's a bit iffy, you know, taking pills. You'll be able to get from food.
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You should be able to get everything you need. B12 is another example.
Wait. Why do you have to get everything? Why do you have to get everything from food and not supplements?
Because maybe just people want to eat, they don't want to take pills. It's unnatural.
But just because something is unnatural doesn't mean you saying it's not natural doesn't follow that someone ought or ought not do that. It could be that something is not natural and they ought to. It could be something.
You're saying that the vegan diet is a diet, right?
I'm saying the vegan diet is a diet, but that doesn't mean it has to be a natural diet.
Are you saying that a vegan diet is a complete diet where you can get all your nutrition from food?
No, naturally no, but non-naturally yes, which is why I don't advocate for a natural vegan diet. I would be crazy to advocate for a natural vegan diet.
So you agree that the vegan diet is a nutritional diet without supplements?
Wait, I agree that you cannot get all of your nutrients on a vegan diet without supplementation, yes. I don't see a problem with that, though. It could still be the case that a vegan diet with supplementation gets you where you need to go and could be healthier than the diet you're presenting. It doesn't follow that just because supplements may be needed from a diet that the diet is excluded from diets we should consider. Because it could be the case that we have a diet that requires supplementation, yet results in better health outcomes than a diet that doesn't require supplementation, and it would still make sense for us to go with the diet that does require supplementation in that case. So you simply pointing out that a diet may require supplementation doesn't get you to where you need to go. It doesn't make your case that it's inferior.
But it is inferior because you just admitted that you can't get everything you need on a vegan diet.
Well, when we're talking about if your measurement of inferior is that metric, sure. But when people talk about inferior diets, what they generally mean is that they lead to problematic health outcomes with respect to another diet.
So you're basically saying nature didn't do everything.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So you're saying that nature didn't set humans up to eat a nutrient complete diet?
That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not making a claim about what nature set us up to do. I'm just saying that it could very well be the case, and I do think there's evidence to show that this is the case in some cohort.
So nature is wrong and you should take pills?
Nature, in many cases, is quote-unquote wrong, and by wrong I just mean leads to things that are less healthy, and you should take pills. There are many examples of this.
What? What is the definition of health?
Sure. So one example in which nature is quote-unquote wrong and you should take pills is you get a bacterial infection. On my view, the quote-unquote right thing to do would be to take antibiotics and treat the infection. The natural thing to do would be to let the infection kill you and die. So just because something is natural doesn't mean it is healthy.
Yeah.
But in terms of diet, don't you agree that a health should eat their natural diet?
No, I don't believe that at all. I think that's crazy. Actually, I think that's a crazy belief. I don't think it follows.
Should eat carb or plastic.
I don't think. No, that's not what I said. That's not what was said. What was said is it just doesn't follow that natural diet is part of evolutionary history. It doesn't follow from that.
So you don't
nature. No, I do believe in evolution. I think you're just misunderstanding what evolution selects for. Evolution isn't selecting for things that are going to generate long-term health. Evolution selects for things that are going to get you to where you need to go to reproduce. It just cares about. It just cares about getting. Doesn't care about you surviving. It cares about you surviving to the point where you can reproduce. and have an increased reproductive fitness. After that, evolution doesn't really care about you. And so what's
care about his surviving?
no, after that's not what was said. So I'm going to repeat what I said so you don't strawman me again. Evolution, what it selects for are things that are going to increase reproductive fitness. So you need to survive just to the point where you can reproduce,
Yep.
to the point where you can increase your reproductive fitness. After that, nature doesn't actually care about your survival. As long as your reproductive fitness wouldn't increase, you can die, and it's totally fine. It's not going to select for things that are healthy for you. It's not going to select for a diet. You wouldn't actually expect evolution to produce a diet that's going to be the optimal diet to live to long age and health. That is actually what you would expect evolution to not produce.
So what happens if an animal doesn't eat?
If an animal doesn't eat,
Yes.
any,
Yes.
it would starve.
Right.
What's the relevance?
So then, isn't diet related to survival?
Okay, listen. Look. Yeah, okay, look. The fact that no. Listen, the fact that one needs to consume in order to eat, it doesn't. You're missing the point here. Yes, I'll agree with you that if you do need to eat something, but what I'm disagreeing with you is that the type of things that we would be expected to eat, if we base it on that which we evolved to eat, quote unquote, we would actually expect that to not produce optimal health outcomes. Based on our understanding of what evolution is, we would expect that to produce suboptimal health outcomes. Because evolution doesn't care about you being healthy in old age.
Yep.
If you are going to have if you are going to have an increased amount of fitness to the point where you can reach reproductive age and reproduce, at the expense of decreased health in older age, that would be selected for.
Okay, do you have any other questions?
I mean, I was answering your questions, but okay. So getting back on topic, so do you have any other evidence that we would need? We would have a problem getting our retinol?
No, that was it.
Oh, that was it. Okay, so that didn't. So you understand why that doesn't pan out, because we can easily get our retinol just through a multivitamin. With the 25 milligrams of beta carotene is sufficient, even if we had a 75% impaired conversion rate.
I'm questioning the bioavailability of that even.
Okay, would you like to go through the calculation?
Well, I'd like to see a study or some research showing that vitamin pills bioavailable.
Sure, that's we can do that. Would you like that study?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. There is a study comparing different conversion rates of synthetic beta carotene, and it is a 6-to-1 conversion rate for beta carotene to retinol. One moment.
What is the line in this
Here's the
debate?
problem here. Wait, I can't hear you.
Is there anybody in this debate, or are we the only?
Yeah, we're the only two. So if you look at this study, synthetic retinol has a 6-to-1 conversion. Just synthetic beta carotene has a 6-to-1 conversion rate. I posted the study in general.
Daily consumption of Indian spinach or sweet potatoes has a positive effect. Vitamin S scores. Results.
If you look at 25 milligrams of beta carotene and you do a 6-to-1 conversion rate, we can go through the math right now.
Patient. design.
So it's 25 divided by 6 is 4.16 milligrams. And even if you assume you're only converting about 25%, what you end up getting is 1.04 milligrams of retinol, which ends up being higher than the 900 micrograms RDA for retinol. So you say that we're 75% impaired on conversion with beta-carotene to retinol, it still wouldn't make your case, because we would still be able to convert more than our RDA at a dose of synthetic beta-carotene that has not been shown to increase all-cause mortality.
No, I'm just reading the study design. Okay, there's that. But what about,
B12.
let's see,
Vitamin
heme
K.
iron?
You can get heme iron. You can get heme iron on a vegan diet.
How?
Have you heard of the Impossible Burger?
Yeah. But
You're
why
aware
the hell
that has
am I
heme
with
iron?
that? That's toxic.
Are you? Why is it? How do you know that's toxic?
Oh, just look at the ingredients. I'm pretty sure it's been associated with renal problems.
And do you have evidence for that?
I saw an article, hang on, just looked up possible.
Is this an article or a peer-reviewed publication? I'm just curious.
I don't know, I just kind of heard about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just curious. First of all, just why would one need heme iron? Are you talking specifically about refractory anemia that hasn't responded to iron supplementation?
The reason I say is because I linked a study here. Can't remember what it says. I'll just have a look at it. Dietary intake of iron status of German female vegans. Yeah, so a bunch of vegans were studied, female vegans in Germany, and they found that they were considered iron deficient. And actually, in my experience, a lot of vegans do look really, really pale.
Why would it follow from that we would need heme iron?
Because we suspect that heme iron is more bioavailable than...
Right, but why? Sure, but why would it follow that they need heme iron? So again, like, you can say that it's more bioavailable, that's fine. But again, if you're looking at cases of vegans that just consume low amounts of iron, that's usually fixed by just supplementing iron. And there's technology now at this point. There's technology now to get vegan heme iron. So it's really just a non-starter on all grounds.
But then you admit again that you can't get another nutrient, heme iron.
Well, you can. You can get there's vegan heme iron. Are you aware of this? There's vegan heme iron that exists now.
I don't know how it's animal iron.
Wait. So 2 points. Number one, you need to make the case that we would need heme iron.
Well, just
point number two. That conclusion doesn't follow. The conclusion that you would need heme iron as opposed to any other form of iron doesn't follow from your study.
Yeah.
And number two, you can get heme iron on a vegan diet.
How?
The Impossible Burger is a form of heme iron.
What
It
is
has
it made
heme
of?
iron. It's made of wheat protein. It's not an animal product, but basically there is a specific modified organism that is commensal to a plant that actually makes heme iron, and it doesn't come from animal. Believe it or not all forms of heme iron come from animal products.
Well, the Impossible Burger is pretty toxic anyways.
How do you know that?
Just look at the ingredients. Would you read that?
What ingredient is toxic?
I'll just have a look at it.
What ingredient is toxic?
Okay, so it's got wheat protein,
Mm-hmm.
coconut oil, that's toxic.
And how do you know that's how do you know coconut oil is toxic?
It's antimicrobial, it kills cells.
How do you know that that's toxic when consumed? You saying it's antimicrobial doesn't help your case.
Well, yes it does, because it kills your cells, yeah. It does.
Do you know what antimicrobial means?
Sorry, bacteria.
Yeah, it can kill bacteria. But okay, so is there any evidence that when the coconut, well, no, that can or cannot be good depending on which ones they kill, and or it could be just neutral if it doesn't kill them in sufficient quantities. Also, coconut oil gets emulsified in the gut, in the stomach, long before it even reaches where most of your microbiome is in the colon anyway. It gets absorbed before it reaches where most of your microbiome is in the first place. So that's just an ignorance of anatomy.
Yeah, but the it doesn't.
Well, no. Listen, you pointing out that it's
also matter as well. You know, it's not just bacteria in your gut.
You point in your mouth. Listen, the bacteria in your mouth quickly regrow. You're not going to wipe out the bacterial colonies with coconut oil. I got news for you.
It would stop.
You don't even do that. Listen, you're not going to even do that with antibiotics. Like this, do you have any evidence for this?
Well, antibiotics are terrible. They decimate people's gut flora.
Antibiotics can decimate people's gut floras, but the mouth microbiota very quickly comes back. I can tell you that right now. Also, do you have any evidence? In toxic concentrations? In what concentrations? Are you aware? Listen, here's the thing. When you claim something is toxic, you can't just make that claim. You actually have to show, like, okay, here's the ingredient, here's what the toxicity level is, here's the concentration, here's how much they're consuming. You can't just say, oh, coconut oil, that's toxic. No, it isn't.
It is. It kills cells.
Do you have any evidence? What's your evidence?
It has salicylates. And salicylates have been associated have cell-killing properties.
Just because something has salicylates doesn't make it toxic.
It wouldn't have salicylates if it was meant for humans to eat.
That's not true. We give salicylates to humans all the time.
That doesn't mean it's not toxic.
Hey, doesn't mean it is toxic. Doesn't mean it is toxic either. Do you have any evidence that it's toxic? You're making the claim here.
Yes, salicylates.
So what's the evidence? Show me that the level of salicylate in the Impossible Burger is toxic.
Well, I don't have that specific information.
Okay, but you need that specific information. Also, where are you seeing the salicylates?
They're in coconut, pretty sure.
They're in all coconut oils?
I don't know, there's various different kinds.
Okay, so wait, because there's no ingredient salicylate in the Impossible Burger. You're inferring it because it says coconut oil. So I'm just asking you, is it all coconut oil that salicylate has? That have salicylates?
Can't say. But I assume would have salicylates. I don't know that for sure, but I wouldn't consume it.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I mean, it all depends on the concentration. So salicylates in a low concentration will almost certainly do nothing. Anything, just almost anything in a low concentration will do almost nothing, or nothing. So you pointing that there's salicylate, what you need to do is show that there's a level of salicylate that is harmful, that to show that based on the amount of coconut oil and the amount of salicylate concentration in this coconut oil, consuming X amount of the Impossible Burger will have this amount of harmful effect. Like, that would be an argument you could run. What you can't...
I don't think that's something that nature intended for us to...
Now you're just appealing to nature again. So appealing to nature isn't going to help you either. Again, nature didn't intend for us to go and be healthy into an old age. So you appealing some things
in our food that actually
Believe it.
harm
Okay,
us.
you're labeling. Okay, again. What is toxicity is all made by the dose. So you are already assuming your conclusion in your premise. It doesn't work like that. You need to show that it's not. No. What makes something toxic? Believe it or not, there are quote unquote that are actually healthy in low doses. There are quote unquote things that are thought to be toxins, and they find out that actually in low doses they're actually beneficial and they're not toxic. It's not that a toxin is a toxin and that's just it.
You may find
contextual based. It's very contextual based on the data.
An anti-nutrient or said toxin, but at the end of the day, they're still a toxin.
Yeah, no, we do. No, we do. Okay, well then, if that's how you want to define it, that's fine. But then it would also follow that we should be consuming them in low doses.
Is that the more of it you consume, the more toxic it will become.
Okay. At some levels, sure, but it actually doesn't follow at low levels. At low levels, we don't see that relationship. There's always a level of anything that's not going to actually harm them.
Sure.
Even cyanide at low levels, you endogenously produce more cyanide than you would get from cyanocobalamin. At low enough cyanide, you can take low enough amounts of cyanide and you would have no effect on it.
Yeah,
so what you need to do, okay, I'm not talking about if there's a need to, no, that's not what we were talking about, though. We were talking about, look, you said there's a problem with iron. This is how we got on this conversation. And I said, well, number one, you need to show why we would need heme iron as opposed to any other iron, because when vegans supplement with other iron pills, they get better. Number two, you need to show that it would be a problem for us to consume the vegan form of heme iron, and you haven't done that.
Yep.
Well, I can't say for sure. There is definitely a problem with iron. I'm saying I found these things to suggest that vegans have problems with
well, no, see, but you're misinterpreting what the study is suggesting. So there may be vegans who have problems with their iron content. That's fine. That's not the question, though. The question is, what happens when you give them elemental iron? What happens when you give them iron supplements? What happens when you give them more iron-rich foods? And the answer is usually they get better. And if you have a really rare case of a vegan who doesn't get better, who has this refractory anemia to all forms of supplementation and needs heme iron, there are vegan sources of heme iron. Now, you haven't made the case that would be problematic to consume.
Well, but I can make the case.
Okay. Can you show me what concentration of salicylates are in coconut oil?
No, I can't do that.
Okay. Yeah, but here's the thing, that's really important. Because if you can't do that, then it's important because if you can't show me the concentration of salicylates that are in coconut oil, there's the harmful effect.
Yeah, but there's no reason to consume it in order to get hair.
Well, in this case,
anyway.
Well, in this case, there would be a reason to consume it if there's a case of refractory anemia and someone's a vegan. So again, if you're going to claim that you claimed it was toxic, in order to substantiate that claim, you're actually going to need to show me the concentration.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do. So is it your position that you don't need to show the concentration in order to make the case that something is toxic?
Yes.
I said I don't need to show any evidence. What I mean is, I don't need to show any evidence.
You made a claim. You claimed it was toxic. Now I'm asking you to show that it's toxic in its concentrations. You need to actually show me the concentration in order to make the claim that it's toxic. If you can't do that, you need to back off your claim. And you can just say you're agnostic about it. You can say I don't know.
Well, I pretty much did.
But you can no. You said it's no. You said it's toxic. You didn't say I don't know that it's toxic. You said it was toxic. You made a claim. So are you going to back off of that claim?
You're asking what toxic is it and at what dose?
No, I'm asking you. No. I'm asking you what dose is present in coconut.
I don't know.
Okay, so then how do you know that it's toxic?
It contains one.
That doesn't make it toxic.
Pretty sure it does.
No, just to be clear, if there is one molecule of the salicylate in and you consume one molecule of it, that's going to be toxic for you. Is that your position?
Not necessarily.
Oh, well, then if wait, hold on. If that's the case, if you say not necessarily, then it is the case that it's dose dependent.
What I meant.
Then at least it could be the case that it's dose dependent. Look, if it's your position that no dose matters, it's toxic regardless of dose, then if there's one molecule of it, you should say it's toxic.
It's probably more appropriate to say it's a toxin regardless of the dose.
Okay, we don't. Then who cares? Then if you're going to define toxin like that, why should we care if it's a toxin? Why should we care if it's a toxin if that's how you define the toxin?
Because you're saying
If it has no negative health outcome, why do we care if it's a toxin?
because you don't need to consume toxins.
Why do I care about consuming it or not if there's no negative health outcome?
Because it's still a toxin. Just because.
Who cares if you're defining toxin that way? If you're going to define toxin in a way that it makes absolutely no difference to your health and consumed in a given amount, then why should I care if I'm consuming that toxin in that given amount?
Well, as I said, you don't know what you don't know. I could come out with a research drug. Let's just say I'm a chemist and I design a research chemical, and there's been no studies about any of the negative health effects, potential health effects of this drug. Would it be safe for me to consume?
Can you actually, I'm just curious, can you actually show me evidence that there are salicylates in coconut oil?
Yeah, give me a second. Yeah, I haven't read any of these, but I'll probably find something.
Wait, you haven't read them?